with no money down.
That's so cool!
Find new roads to Chevrolet of Turnersville in the Turnersville Auto Mall.
And ChevroletofTurnersville.com.
Discount off MSRP, 36-month lease with approved credit, excludes tax, tag, title, registration, and 449 doc fee. See dealer for full details. Offer expires 10/31/2020.
Wouldn't it be nice to have something simple in your life right about now? Pella Windows and Doors is dedicated to making the window and door buying experience a breeze. Their consultants and installation teams are committed to safely guide you from concept to completion with new windows and doors that are tailored to your needs and a process that couldn't be any simpler.
Now through October 31st, get 50% off installation or 48-month interest-free financing. Call 877-98-PELLA or visit PellaPhilly.com.
Contact Pella today. It couldn't be more simple.
WMGK Philadelphia and WMGK HD Digital 1, a Beasley Media Group station.
Hey, Matt Court here, and seasonal beers, you know they come and go this time of year, but nothing beats the crisp, refreshing taste of a Heineken. Heineken Original Lager is made with 100% natural ingredients with pure malt and their famous A yeast, making Heineken an all-season, all-the-time kind of a beer. Whether you're headed out or you're staying indoors, enjoy an always seasonal Heineken Original Lager. It's definitely the right season for it. Pick up a pack or have one delivered. But no matter when you enjoy Heineken, please enjoy responsibly.
Everyone's temperatures vary throughout the day, so it's important that you screen for fever in the morning and in the evening. Fever is a sign of COVID-19, so stay safe with the Exergen Temporal Scanner.
Now, classic rock.
Good evening, everyone, and welcome to the Newtown Township Board of Supervisors meeting for October 28th, 2020. As usual, we will do a moment of silence, and I'd like to make a few comments, which I've been doing since this COVID has devastated us. While we're taking a moment of silence, I'd like for everyone to remember all those affected by this horrible virus and their families, and those on the front lines, the doctors, lawyers, EMTs, police, fire, all of those who answer the call of duty unselfishly, and those everyday important essential workers, garbage collectors, supermarket workers, food servers, just to name a few. And here in our township, our management and our administrative staff and our Public Works Department, all together, they keep our township running. Let us support our local businesses the best we can, and never forget to be generous with a tip to those essential workers. Most of all, treat people with respect and kindness. Together as a community, we will be stronger when this is all over. And if you just bow your heads for a moment of silence. Stand with the board for a Pledge of Allegiance, please. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Mr. Lewis, any changes or additions to the agenda tonight?
There are no changes, Mr. Chairman.
Okay, no special actions. I guess we'll go into our first session of public comment of anything that is not on the agenda tonight. Well, we do have a discussion of the budget.
So how about I wait till the public comment right before that? Is that okay?
Well, or you could wait. We have it in the under old business,
Right.
so you can wait until then if you want to make a comment.
That's fine. I have no
Okay.
problem waiting.
Sure, thank you. Anyone else like to make a public comment? Okay. Moving right along, we have a presentation tonight from the Newtown Ambulance Squads, a report. Chief Resnicoff.
Okay. Good evening, everyone. Thank you for inviting me here this evening to give an annual report. We're We're going to try to do this earlier in the year in the same format we did a few years ago, and with COVID, everything got put to the side. So I'm pleased to bring to you a report from Newtown Ambulance for this year, what's been going on with us, where we're going, and also how this kind of relates to the budget discussion later on this evening. Do you have that presentation slides? There we are. Okay. All right. We can go to the first next slide, please. I'm going to first give a shameless plug for our annual subscription drive. This normally is in the mail by now, but in discussion with our company that handles this and our own internal concerns with the mail and the election, we're holding off the mailing of this until about the second or third week of November. You can, anyone, a township resident or over in the borough, can go onto our website and actually subscribe for 2021 now. That is up and live and running. But when it does come in the mail, the envelope's going to look like this, and it is not junk mail. Last year, we were pleased, last year, from 19 to 2020, which just ended the campaign, we actually had an increase of 2.8% in donors. We think part of this is because of the technology we use with the new website, as well as we purchased a new mailing list this year. Our mailing list was about 7 or 8 years old and patched together. So from the county, we purchased a new property tax map list, and we were able to update our mailing. So we appreciate everyone's support in last year's subscription drive. And an important note with the subscription drive is, while it helps us, it also helps anyone who joins, because if you lose your insurance or you have insurance with high deductible, we write off your balance or write off your entire bill if you don't have insurance or have one of the high deductible plans like we do. And there's more information about that on the squad's website. Okay, we can go to the next slide. Since there may be a lot of new residents and a lot of people who really don't know what we're capable of, I'm going to just run down quickly some of our capabilities. We have a fleet of 8 ambulances. 3 of them are basic life support, which are equipped at the level with just 2 EMTs. We have 1 basic life support specialty ambulance, which is the bariatric unit. There's a picture of that in a couple slides coming up soon. And we have 4 advanced life support units. We have 5 wheelchair vans, and while they don't pertain necessarily to the township, I'm going to discuss why I'm mentioning the extra capabilities in a couple slides. We have 2 that are primary for the township, 2 that are ready reserve backup ambulances, and my vehicle was just replaced this year, which is in the process for licensing it to actually be a quick response vehicle to also serve the township. Our organization is a member of the Regional Task Force for Active Shooter Incidents. We have our in-service time with certified people is 88% a month for the task force. And we have specific staff members that were credentialed through 3 training sessions that the county had put up, along with about 7 or 8 other county squads that are in the task force. And what that means is, if there should be an incident anywhere in the county, we're one of the units that's going to get automatically dispatched. So we're proud to be part of that plan. We're also active in the Bucks County EMS Chiefs Association, the Bucks County Medical Advisory Board, and the EMS and Public Safety Communications Advisory Board. We can go on to the next slide. Now, while some of the extra vehicles I spoke of in there are used on our transport division, the other side of the fence, we do put them into play when there's a major incident in the county. So in 2019, and again, I haven't presented since 2018, we participated in 2 nursing home evacuations due to severe weather. One was the Crestview Nursing Home, where within an hour we sent 4 ambulances over there to assist them without degrading our existing service to the township. And a week after that one happened, Pediatric Specialty Care in Plumstead Township had an electrical issue from a thunderstorm and had to evacuate their kids to Doylestown Hospital. We sent 3 ambulances and a wheelchair van up there, ambulances for the people and a wheelchair van to move equipment to get those kids out of there. So we are part of a larger regional EMS system. There's also been several other times within the county since then where the county's been so busy due to either an isolated incident or a weather incident, where any extra units we could put on service have been relocated to other parts of the county. Most recently, during the tornado that struck in Doylestown in August, we went from having 2 ambulances in service to 6 within 15 minutes. So we pull our people that are doing the routine transports off of those details, log them up for municipal service, and send them wherever the county wants them to go. So we are rich in resources for not just our own township, but others around us. So in the last 5 years, and most of you on the board have known me, I came to the squad as chief in 2015, and we've come a long way. And we've really, in the last 2 years, some of the changes have really been escalated. Especially this summer, Brian Beecher, our battalion chief, who used to accompany me to some of these meetings, he retired to South Carolina, and we promoted an assistant chief, a battalion chief, both from our ranks of paramedics, 1 captain and 2 lieutenants. Even though we've promoted some ranking officers, we actually are saving in payroll about $30,000 a year because those officers are required to do time on the schedule on the ambulance. And prior to that, the chief officers weren't required to do that. So by them getting on the ambulance a minimum of 24 hours a week, they're still part of the schedule. We're not using those hours to fill somebody else in with there. And they also help to fill out vacations, call-outs, and other special events as well. So we've actually got cost savings by, even though we were able to expand some of the command staff. We have really increased support with municipal services, notably, and I think a lot of people aren't aware of this, we provide Newtown Emergency Service, Glenn's department, Chief Forsyth's department with all the medical supplies and medical oxygen. And anytime they need something, they come right over and get it. Early on during the pandemic, when his department as well as the police department needed some PPE, we had enough cash to start to spread that around a little bit until we started getting distributions from the county. And we have spent, since the pandemic has kind of waned a little bit, we've been spending the last couple months building up another cash. So we feel very well prepared for this next wave that's going on right now. We can go to the next slide under statistics. The next slide for statistics. So the NFPA standard for an ALS unit to arrive on scene from time of dispatch is 9 minutes. Bucks County's statistics, and the ones that you usually get every year from the Emergency Health Service Office, give you statistics from time going en route to time on scene. So using that statistic, our response time for a paramedic unit is 5.55 minutes. If we add the dispatch time, where it's 7.55 minutes, so we're still well under the national minimum standard of 9 minutes. Basic life support is at 6.1 minutes, and the time for BLS is always higher because we don't use lights and sirens, or termed emergency speed, to respond to basic life support calls, and that's a county regional protocol. So unless the crew deems, based on the dispatch information necessary, they'll respond at normal speed going to those kind of emergency calls. 79% of our calls are during the day from 6 a.m. to 6 p.m., and only 21% of them are from 6 p.m. to 6 a.m. And these are 2020 statistics through October 24th. 92% of our responses are here in Newtown Township, with the other 8% making up other municipalities, including Newtown Borough. There's a small amount of Upper Makefield that we cover up along Creamery Road and the Enclave neighborhood, as well as a small section of Lower Makefield. We've run mutual aid into Wrightstown, Northampton, and Middletown Townships. We also do some mutual aid into Upper Makefield. And we should note that Upper Makefield Township does provide us a small amount of compensation based on the area that we cover in Upper Makefield every year. We receive a very small amount for that. So what's really been the impact this year? So 2020 started out to be one of the busiest years ever for EMS in here for our organization as well as in the county. We were trending to be almost 400 runs more than the previous year. And then since COVID happened, we're trending to be 500 runs less than last year. And last year wasn't exactly a stellar year to begin with for the number of calls. At one point during the pandemic, we were down about 60%, and that's pretty close to what the countywide average was. The EMS organization saw a sharp decrease in EMS runs. Right now, we're down still about 30% of our monthly call volume over last year. And as you can imagine, that's had a financial impact because we haven't cut services. Since 2017, our overall EMS revenue is down by $400,000. And this is caused by the loss of our territory in Northampton Township. And I compare the loss of that section of our coverage area to if the police department were to lose Wrightstown. It's a comparable percentage of our overall operating picture. We compensated for that by grants for equipment, by eliminating unfilled positions, and moving other things around. We restructured some things, and we've had the resiliency to be able to change to meet that challenge without impacting our service to Newtown Township. There's also been a decrease in call volume overall because the demographic has changed. So the average patient age continues to be lower than it was in 2017. So our average patient age back in 2017, I think that was in the written report from back then, was 69.5, and we had 30% of our patients over the age of 80. So as you can imagine, a few years later, that population has moved on, and we're seeing a younger population of patients. What we are also seeing this year is a sharp increase in psychiatric calls, largely due to the pandemic. We're also seeing a large increase in sick patients. So the acuity, meaning how sick somebody is even though we're not running as many calls, we're seeing patients with far more complicated and far more serious medical problems. And that's directly attributed to the fact that people were afraid to go to the hospital, afraid to call 911 earlier, didn't see their doctors. Telemedicine didn't really start to catch on until a little bit later in the year, in this summer with a lot of people. And there's statistical evidence countywide, even the health department agrees that is a valid statement. So under COVID operations, we along with many other EMS agencies were very fortunate to have received the Paycheck Protection Loan. We anticipate that will be forgiven under the guidelines of that. It was 100% used for payroll. That'll be recorded as a grant essentially once we close out the year. We also received $17,000 in a Medicare stimulus payment. The painful part of that is that it came with a stipulation that we cannot balance bill any patient, no matter who their insurance company is, if they were a COVID positive patient. So there were EMS agencies in our region that actually sent the money back because they could not afford to not balance bill. So this was a small amount of money, but not knowing what our financial picture was going to be like, we accepted it and are tracking those patients to ensure that they're not balanced bill. 3 of our staff members tested positive and were in quarantine, but the good news was that there was not an occupational acquired infection. It was contact traced to outside the workplace. We did honor the voluntary compliance with the CARES Act of paying them for their time out without charging them paid time off, because we were told that FEMA would reimburse us for that, only to find out that FEMA decided not to reimburse us for that. So we shouldered 100% of the salary expense for doing that. Public safety and hospitals were exempt from the CARES Act mandation of that, but we felt the right thing to do was to continue to pay our staff. Next slide, under grant-funded equipment. We've been real busy with raising money. The last 2 years have been very successful. This summer we received a COVID grant from the Rotary. In 2018, with the help from Representative Perry Warren, we received a $112,000 grant to buy a 4-wheel drive ambulance. And this year, and I've said year over year, standing before you about our bariatric ambulance, myself and the chief of the Pendle Middletown Emergency Squad worked with County Commissioner Marseglia, the Emergency Health Service Office, and Bucks County Emergency Management to get federal funding for replacement ambulances for our bariatric service. So that big yellow ambulance, us and Pendle Middletown received identical ambulances from the federal task force funds that respond anywhere in the county for bariatric patients. And what's really important about that is we saw a doubling of those calls during the height of the pandemic, because that population is one of the most vulnerable to COVID. So at one point, our bariatric ambulance did 8 runs in a week. We never even saw 8 runs in a month. So it really had some time this year. That ambulance that we received through the county was actually a 2015 model, but it only has 36,000 miles on it. It's going to be a 10-year ambulance for us. We received $60,000 last year from a private resident in the small section of Upper Makefield that we cover, which funded that ambulance, which is pictured there. This past year, thanks to Micah pointing me in a direction of a DCED grant, we received $4,995 for a secondary bariatric stretcher. And we have the various fire commissioner grants that are awarded to us year over year. The second 2020 fire commissioner grant was one that the state added on this year just for COVID. Some quick statistics for COVID. For our 911 service here in town, we transported 18 confirmed COVID positive patients. And while, again, our transport service doesn't really apply to the township, just an interesting statistic, we transported 241 COVID positive patients from a hospital to another destination. That's a regional service, so there was quite a bit of COVID in our hospitals at one point. COVID, as I'm sure that you're tired of hearing from every corner of the world, it's increased our operating budget significantly. Our medical supplies, we are overspent by 67% from our original budget, as of course we could never have predicted that this occurred. A lot of that's going to be made up through that COVID fire commissioner grant that we just got awarded. There are other things that we're incurring, like COVID surcharges. Our medical oxygen delivery service levies a COVID surcharge. Medical supply costs are through the roof for the same things that we used to buy. For example, 2 nights before the pandemic really hit the news, I ordered 200 surgical gowns for $45. In July, I bought 500 surgical gowns for $1,500, the same exact item. We're also seeing delayed insurance reimbursements due to many carriers having staff work from home. And it's been very hard to get through the insurance carriers on the provider side because their agents are working from home remotely. And we've seen delayed reimbursements and mishandled claims because of that. So that's really hurt the regular revenue cycle, but because we had the Paycheck Protection money to cushion us, it's been kind of working out. Next slide, please. On the legislation front, I've been very outspoken to a lot of our elected officials concerning the state's support or lack of support of emergency medical services. And one of the most damaging things that we are faced with right now is House Bill 1862. So this bill is designed with good intention to fix a problem with surprise balance billing, and I'm sure everybody's really familiar with that with insurance. However, at this moment, the bill as written does not exempt emergency medical services. What this bill does is it puts 100% of the control in the hands of the insurance company to reimburse us what they feel is the fair number. And then on a patient-by-patient basis, we have to go to arbitration to dispute that. And some of these insurance companies are kicking around numbers like Medicare plus 10%, 90% of Medicare, and Medicare doesn't even cover our cost to treat a patient. So this is a very dangerous piece of legislation. There are several amendments on the table right now to exclude EMS from this. There are several states in the United States that passed this legislation but carved out emergency services. So we're really hoping that it passes with an amendment that excludes us, because this will, without a doubt, cripple EMS throughout the entire Commonwealth. And we will be no different here. Next slide. On the finance piece, our revenue comes 89% as fee for service. 5% of it's from our subscription drive. 5% is from tax revenue. That's up 1% since we went to the EMS Millage as opposed to a few years ago, and 1% from other private donations and grants. In the past, I've always spoken publicly about the insurance reimbursement as being the issue. And while that is still a problem, it's not 100% of the problem. And in speaking with a lot of my colleague chiefs around the county, the cost is the 24-hour state of readiness. And it's why other 24-hour departments you have in public safety, the payroll number is so high, because we always have to be here. And while insurance, again, is a big part of it, the cost of that state of readiness has a cost, and it has to come from somewhere. And there's not a doubt that we are here when you call us. And even though we don't run a lot of calls certain times, especially now, we still have to staff people around the clock to be able to get those ambulances out the door within 2 minutes. This year, we're shockingly seeing a 10% increase in employee health insurance. And I say shocking because the last 2 years, we saw 3% reductions from Blue Cross year over year. And our group has suddenly popped up 10%. We also have had a lot of staff turnover because of uncompetitive wages, and also COVID. We saw 4 people quit and not return to EMS. So we incurred a lot of overtime costs this year because of that. We're looking at replacing an ambulance, a 10-year-old ambulance. We're looking at about $120,000 for that in 2021. And we are faced with requirement to replace our 4 cardiac monitors this summer, which will be a cost of that's actually incorrect. It's $128,000 total, not $128,000 per unit. That's my mistake. $128,000 total for the 4, and then it is $28,000 total for the maintenance plans for the 4 of them. The cardiac monitors we have are end of life in 2022. Our lease is up in 2021, and we were having trouble getting parts for them as is, even though they're still supposed to be supported another year. The medical device manufacturer, Philips Medical, is having trouble getting parts. The good news is we had a workers' comp reduction of $16,000. So that was a little bit of silver lining to the cloud. Last slide. Okay, so we have an EMS millage, and when this was put into the last budget, or 2 budgets ago, we were very appreciative of the change that the Board of Supervisors made. That was truly life-saving for us, and we feel good that it benefited the township by putting the LST money back into the township's budget. No EMS service anywhere can survive without municipal funding. No EMS service can survive on just fee-for-service revenue, especially since it's the unstable nature of insurance reimbursements and the constant changing rules and policies. Other things that have really hurt us is the Emergency Medical Service Operating Fund, which is funded by the CAT fee when you get pulled over and get a ticket. About 15, 20 years ago, Bucks County used to see around $200,000 or more distributed amongst all the EMS organizations. And we used to make capital purchases with this money. We'd buy cardiac monitors, stretchers, money towards an ambulance, and that has dwindled to barely $40,000 for regional projects only. In 2021, because of COVID, the state has told us that there'll be an 11% reduction in MSOF to Bucks County, and the county commissioners are going to make up the difference from the county's budget for that. And that's mainly because there were a reduction in moving violations this year because no one was driving, so they're not collecting the fees and the fines, so the MSOF fund's dropping even further. There's no statewide funding for EMS, and there's no dedicated EMS grant. So while we're very appreciative of the fire commissioner grant that we receive year over year, it's $50 million. $6 million goes to EMS, $44 million goes to fire. And when I discussed this with the Ambulance Association of Pennsylvania, their response was that's because that's how that particular grant is legislated. So today there are still no dedicated EMS grant. And grants like that are great for making capital purchases so that we don't have to strain or take loans. And I hate debt. I hate taking out loans. So we look for all these grant projects that I've gotten in the last 2 years to try to do capital improvements on that, because without having to take a loan, get it with a grant, it puts us 5 years ahead. So I can ask you as a Board of Supervisors that when you go to the Picado meetings, and I know that a lot of township officials around the county have discussed this, while it's in the township code to provide for EMS, some of this should get pushed back on the Commonwealth, because the mandates, our protocols, our licensure requirements all comes from the Department of Health in Harrisburg. And a lot of the equipment we carry, which we agree is great for patient care, a lot of there's mandates on there and certain drugs that we're now purchasing that we have to buy, and we can't fund that from billing a patient. For example, when we bill a patient, we're billing advanced life support or basic life support, and that's it. So whether we use $1,200 in supplies and equipment or $300 in supplies or equipment, we're billing a flat rate plus mileage, and that's it. We can't do a COVID surcharge, a fuel surcharge, It's black and white with billing. A long time ago, we could itemize. And itemized billing went away many, many years ago. So that is my presentation, and I'm happy to entertain any questions.
Chief, what would you like to see the township assist you in to help you in the future, either financially or emotionally? How can we help? Naturally, knowing that we're in a budget crunch also, but we love to help out as best as possible. So, any suggestions that you may have that we can entertain?
So I could never expect the township to take anything out of its own budget because there is no money to take. And I'm very plugged into what's going on here. I've been year over year at the meetings and all the budget meetings. This year we've discussed an increase of from 0.46 to 0.5 mils, which is the state maximum without a referendum for our EMS millage. And we very much appreciate that consideration in this current budget. It's a very small amount of money, but it's a starting point. In the future, and it's not just here in the township, I'm trying to have discussions with the borough as well because the millage there is only 0.25, to look at a potential referendum for the future. Now, if it goes to referendum and you go to a certain millage, as you know, like you've done with the fire tax, you don't have to collect up to that amount. It just gives us that headroom. So another bite to us is the EMS, again, state regulated is 0.5 is the maximum without a referendum. Fire can go up to 3 without a referendum. So the fire service, and this isn't, pushing down any other service, it's just a comparison of how we're regulated. We don't have any headroom, and we have to immediately go to referendum to go above 0.5. And that's another disparagement of treatment and disparagement of funding with EMS statewide isn't viewed like the other public safety entities when we're really given the bare minimum. So I think in the future we should have some discussions with the township and also with the borough about looking at appropriate millage, since we are providing 24-hour service to all the municipalities, the same level of service. Number of calls in each municipality isn't exactly where the cost is coming from. It's coming from the 24-hour state of readiness, and that needs to be a shared venture.
Any other questions for the chief?
Yeah, I have a couple, if you don't mind. So in our budget, we are getting up to 0.5 mils for this. Is that correct?
That's correct.
So the increase would be just about $17,500, and my contribution would be $4 a year extra. But I'm also, I think, a member of your subscription plan.
Yes.
Or at least I was. And so I'll continue to do that. But you mentioned the borough is only at 0.25 mil?
Correct, and that's about $10,000.
That's about 10,000? So, and you mentioned that 0.5 mil is the maximum that
Without a referendum, yes.
Without
a referendum. So if we wanted to go to 1 mil, this would have to be about question on next November's election.
Oh, I see. Okay.
And the residents would get to decide whether to support that increase or not.
Okay. Interesting to know. In 2017, I think, 2018, you came in with an annual report for 2017. I guess, can we expect, you went through a lot of details here, which I appreciate, but the annual report gives you a year versus year comparison. Is there plans to do an annual report for 2020?
Once we can close out the year and really take stock in what just happened, we'll provide an annual report.
Okay, that's great. And you mentioned there at that time about $123,000 received from local services taxes. And do you know what that would be in 2021?
I don't know, but I can imagine that the LST would be reduced because of the lack of people working. Mr. Lewis could probably more answer what that prediction might be, but that's all in the wage tax. So if people aren't working, or if other municipalities are taking that for people that work in our township, you know, that's sure that number would be less.
So that's sort of related to the EIT in terms of people working.
I don't know if it's necessarily the same thing, but
not the same amount. I mean,
No, it's a tax to anyone working in the township. I believe it's maxed out at $52.
$52.
That's right.
$52.
That came
That's
from
the
the LSP.
$52
Right,
one.
and
I
also
get it,
we do have a somewhat lenient for any senior citizen making below, I think, a $12,000 annual wage, of which they don't pay the tax at all. But we do collect the tax from other residents living outside of the township that may work in Newtown Township.
Okay, good to know. Thank you. Have there been any increases in calls involving drug overdoses? Because since the start of the pandemic, because I've heard in the news that there might be an uptick in the overdose of overdosing.
In our area, no. Meaning our response area. There are parts of the county where it was pretty brisk for a while during the pandemic, pretty significant amounts, but not pertaining to our response area.
Okay. And overall, how would you say the overdose problem is in Newtown maybe compared to last year?
I think it's pretty flat. I really haven't seen much change. There's a very small handful of cases of that.
Okay. I think that's all the
At least
questions.
as far, sorry to interrupt, as far as EMS is concerned, there could be cases going on that were not called for, especially with the amount of people that have access to Narcan. But as far as our responses are concerned, year over year, since 2017 is when we started seeing them, because we didn't see many before that, it's been pretty consistent, low number, less than 10 a year.
I know our police department have administered Narcan. I forget exactly how many times, but when the police administer Narcan, is the emergency service, is your squad also called to the scene?
We are, yes.
Okay. I think that's all I have. Thank you.
Okay.
Anyone else?
I just wanted to thank you. There's a very detailed report with lots of moving pieces. I think maybe you didn't answer part of Chairman Calabro's question, was what can we do to boost the morale? I mean, if COVID rates of infection are going up. I mean, I know back in April, May, we, sent food over and things like that. Is there anything that we can do as a community to boost morale?
I very much appreciate that. So we had a lot of that happen. The staff love to eat, so they always love food. And that was nice when we were going through some pretty stressful times. And as far as on the administration, the staff, we're having a little something for them in 2 weeks. But just be good listeners if we need to come to you with a problem. And I do speak with Chief Forsyth on an almost daily basis, so we have excellent communication with our police and fire departments, as well as Chief Gerhardt. So, if we get into a situation which may be more logistical than financial at this very moment, just to be partners with us, and we can discuss things to work out our problems.
Fantastic, thank you.
Thank you.
Kyle, anything? David?
Chief, thank you for the report. I appreciate you and your staff and what you've done for our township and also our surrounding townships, just to support those that are in need. My older brother was a EMT for quite some time. He's a little bit older than I am, 13 years older, so as a young child I used to see him, running out to go save lives and stuff like that. So I appreciate everything you and your staff do, just from a nostalgic standpoint as well. So tell all your members of your staff, I thank them personally. I just have two questions. One, based upon, you said 8% are made up of Newtown 8% is made up of Newtown Borough, Upper Makefield, Lower Makefield, and Mutual Aid in Northampton, Middletown Township, Wrightstown Township. How much revenue does Upper Makefield provide to your department?
It varies based on they have some sort of formula based on the number of responses. Their EMS chief provides them with a report of how many times other agencies come in to Upper Makefield, and Upper Makefield reimburses us, as well as, I believe it's Central Bucks that responds to one section there as well. So it's anywhere between $800 and $1,200 a year, because the amount of times we go up there is a pretty constant number. Based on the area we have. So we're talking about less than 20 calls a year.
Okay. All right. Thank you. And then last question, you said in 2017 when your revenue was down $400,000 annually, 2017, you said you did some restructuring. What does that entail in terms of the restructuring? Because did that mean that you reduced the amount of equipment or needs of your staff? Just curious, because I mean, obviously what you do is very important, and we want to make sure that you have the necessary, capabilities to do your job well. So that was just a concern of mine in terms of what you restructured.
Sure, yeah, and I'll never do anything in the restructuring to degrade service. So that was at the top. So we had an administrative director. When that person was let go, that position wasn't replaced. So I took on those duties. Our president, which was a full-time position, is now no longer a full-time position, and I've assumed most of the administrative duties that he was doing. He's still on the board and is an advisor to me. I do attend our board meetings fully, but that high-level position, career position, is gone as well. And then there was a fourth billing department person that was let go and not replaced. As well as we had another chief officer that was let go and not replaced as well. So these were all higher level positions that were eliminated and consolidated. So as the chief, I'm overseeing the budget, payroll, hiring, firing, and operations.
Gotcha. That seems to be a theme in terms of some of our departments.
Yes.
But thank you for that. And actually, one more question. You said in 2018 you got the $112,000 grant from based upon Perry Warren's help?
Yes.
Is there and that grant was just specifically for an ambulance? It has to go to that specifically, or?
So that we were discussing different grants at the time.
Okay.
And he helped us with a Pennsylvania Health and Human Service grant.
Okay.
It was kind of open, and at the time we needed to replace an ambulance badly.
Okay.
So we wrote it for an ambulance, and we got funded for an ambulance.
Okay. Now, can that grant, is that a grant that you can go for each year? Like, I mean, I didn't see that you had one in 2019 or.
That's not clear to me. I think
Okay.
it was a specific grant at that particular time that
Okay.
happened to be available.
Okay, so we can go back and see what the state or the Commonwealth has to offer in terms of grants for you as well.
It's always good. I'm finding as I'm starting to shake some trees and ask questions, I'm
Right.
starting to find grants and opportunities in there, and we've been pretty successful with that these last few years.
All right, we'll keep looking for those diamonds in the rough, my man.
Thank
you. Appreciate it.
Chief, just to I guess, plug the subscription drive, which is very important, probably, I would assume your number one fundraising money earner. I just was, in my head, I believe we have about 8,000 homes in Newtown Township, that even if they were to give even half of that, 4,000 of those homes, you're looking at over $250,000 just in subscription. So I think that's, to emphasize that, I think we have to keep plugging it. $65 for a household, which I know personally comes in very handy when, unfortunately, it may be needed. So I just appeal to the people of this township to really think and dig in their pockets to get a subscription to the ambulance squad, because it's very important for your survival and for our survival too.
I appreciate that. Any opportunity you have to help us advertise that once it gets in the mail. It is on the website right now, and it's live. The subscription drive does go a long way. So of the looks like we're going to round out the last campaign with $110,000 from our subscription drive. I believe our write-offs towards service was only $20,000. So it's still a very beneficial program for us and those who join. Ours is the least restrictive. You could use it 5 or 10 times, 20 times. There's no limit to it. So there's some services that this became an expensive venture and they've had to put limits on it, but we don't have any limits on ours because it's still beneficial. So.
If no further questions, thanks, Chief. Appreciate it.
Thank you, everyone.
So I guess we'll move on. We have no minor approvals, no public hearing, reports of committees, boards, and commissions. Mr. Fiddler.
Good evening. Alan Fiddler, Chairman of the Newtown Township Planning Commission, here to give you a brief synopsis of our October 20, 2020 meeting. That evening we had 2 residential zoning hearing board applications. The first was for Matt Conklin at 4 Hansel Road. The Commission reviewed this application for relief to build a garage extension requiring a front yard setback relief of 2.95 feet. And we recommended that the supervisors support this application. The second application was from Kit Ford at 125 Winding Lane. The Commission reviewed this application for a variance for increased building coverage and a special exception to alter a building on a non-conforming lot to be adding a kitchen extension. The request is very small, and the home predates the ordinance that established the parameters of what could be built on a non-conforming lot. The Commission recommended that the supervisors again support this application. We also discussed 2 JMZO amendments. The first one came from Upper Makefield, a riding academy. Here the Commission reviewed this proposed ordinance and felt that it had not addressed all the concerns thoroughly. In particular, the possible subdivision of large properties and placing cumbersome restrictions on the remaining agricultural uses. We would like to review the zoning map to locate any Newtown properties that could be impacted by this ordinance before continuing our discussion. The second JMZO amendment, also I believe came from Upper Makefield, and this regards the definition of a family. There have not been changes to this draft ordinance, which was reviewed by the Planning Commission in March. Its attempts through the definition of family to restrict the use of homes for very short-term rentals, Airbnb as an example. The members questioned why controlling short-term rentals would need to set parameters on what constitutes a family. Ms. Fountain said that she would provide us with information on other municipalities' attempts to limit short-term rentals. Under new business, the Commission took up the discussion of expanding possibly permitted uses in our business district, the LI, OLI, and the OR district, as it is being discussed at the Economic Development Committee and is referenced in recommendations in front of the township. We understand that our ordinance should be reviewed to expand some uses and possibly eliminate some obsolete uses, and we would like to meet with the EDC to discuss this further. It was suggested that the chair as well as our planner be invited to attend the EDC upcoming meeting. And that basically concludes my report.
Alan, I don't think you'll have a problem scheduling the EDC. We have somebody here that is connected to it, so I'm sure you can set that up.
Okay.
But I have a question on the definition of family, which I sat in on a few of those meetings, and I don't know what gives us as a body, a governing body, to determine what the definition of a family is. because there's all kinds of definitions of a family.
There is, and I believe the jointure and Mary Everly has suggested that maybe the term should be a family living unit, which could be expanded for care providers that would reside in the home, non-relatives that are living under the roof for 30 continuous days. But again, the parameters are, again, seem to be convoluted in my opinion because they're trying to discuss short-term rentals. Whether the component of who's living in that rental should be a consideration, I don't know. It may be something for the legal mind, but I think Upper Mayfield was trying to control an absentee owner that does not reside in the residence that they own from renting it out on a weekly basis on vacation rental by owner. They see this as a potential threat to the community in their zoning districts, and want to try and come up with some solution to control that.
Yeah, I mean, this is not to belabor this. I mean, I just think that trying to define a family and also trying to tell an owner what he can do with his property seems to be some sort of violation. And we're looking at properties that are not like $50,000 row homes in Camden. We're looking at multi-million-dollar properties of which if they're charging a rent, I would think would be a substantial amount of money. Now, what's wrong with a person who may go to Florida for half the year and wants to rent his house out for half the year? These people are trying to prohibit that. Also, I look at, they always bring up Airbnb, which is an international company all over the world, which if you ever go onto their website, they have parameters and rules and regulations, and they just seem to be wanting to reinvent the wheel, so to speak, which doesn't have to be done. I just think it's I don't know, an infringement on a lot of people's rights that own a home. Why don't they just come in and say, we don't like your furniture, take it out, we want you to put certain furniture in there. I've always had a problem with this from when I sat in on some of these discussions, and I just kind of look at the community that wants to institute this kind of ruling, and that's all I have to know.
No, I think you're in a position that you can share your concerns at JMZO. Board of Supervisors are voting members, so, you're the people that count in terms of, trying to nip things in the bud that you don't see fitting in Newtown Township.
I agree with Phil. I don't like this, but just a point of clarification, they're not trying to limit somebody who goes on vacation and wants to rent their home out for 30 or more days.
Mm-hmm.
Correct?
No, it's short term. It's less than 30
only short term, and so it's really focused on Bed Bath and not Bed Bath and Beyond. Be Airbnb.
Yeah.
Now, I understand some of the problems of Airbnb, having participated in overseas in Airbnbs and ringing the wrong doorbell and annoying neighbors and so on. But I also know that the Lower Bucks County Chamber of Commerce has promoted businesses like hotels and bed and breakfasts, and they're considering that they should help promote Airbnb as well to bring more visitors to Bucks County, for example, which would help the economy a bit, I imagine, in terms of tourist trade. So that's my opinion. Thank you.
Very good.
Anyone else for Alan?
I had a real quick question for Alan.
Yes.
Have you gotten to take a second look, or maybe even the first look, as I remember, the EAC recommendations that on the comprehensive plan? Is that on your agenda anytime soon? Or?
In terms of the comprehensive plan regarding the EAC?
Yes.
We did not discuss at our recent meeting. We have, looked at the original recommendation that went forward without any recommended changes or comments, thinking that Bucks County Planning Commission could take a look at the 10 points that the EAC had, identified and see how those could fit into the comprehensive plan update. The action points that the EAC had included almost seemed like the working documents that could go to the jointure partners to consider in their saldo ordinances if they so desired to put teeth into how to accomplish some of the suggestions that would possibly be included in the comprehensive plan. So I think there are two parts that went to Bucks County, and hopefully they got the message straight that, the first part's the important part, the second part should go back to the jointure partners for their inclusion if they so decide to modify any of their saldo requirements.
Great.
Okay?
Thank you.
All right. Thank you very much. Have a good evening.
Thank you, Alan. On to members' reports. Chairman, I just want to mention something while it's fresh on my mind. The Wednesday before Thanksgiving, we're scheduled to have a meeting, and I just want to ask the board, as far a consensus, is everything okay with us meeting the Wednesday before? Kyle?
Okay with me.
Dennis?
Okay with me.
John?
Yes, everybody's going anywhere.
Yeah. David?
I'm fine, Mr. Chairman, thank you. I
Okay.
checked with Mrs. Oxley, I'm okay.
Okay, okay.
I checked with Mrs. Fisher.
So we're okay for the Wednesday before Thanksgiving. And that's all I have. Dennis?
Since I have two reports because I went to Newtown Fire Association meeting and the Finance Committee meeting, but they're going to be coming up later in the agenda, and I can maybe add my comments at that point. One thing that I did want to just mention real quickly is the Economic Development Committee and Finance Committee chairs and liaisons met to continue kind of trying to figure out where we might have overlapping tasks and how we can kind of fit together without duplicating effort. So we're continuing to do that and making some progress. Other than that, I just hope all of our neighborhood Halloween celebrations are in this day of COVID are socially distanced, and we take care of have fun and take care of ourselves.
Thank you. Mr. Mack?
I just wanted to mention some activity by the Human Relations Commission that met on October 21st. Members discussed the police reports and better collaboration with the police department, and they recapped the Walking While Black, Love is the Answer event hosted by the Peace Center at the Bucks County Community College. And I think our chief of police was also participating in that. It was the movie was shown over Zoom, I guess, or a website, and then they had a Zoom meeting rooms where you could actually talk with local police. So that was a successful event. And in celebration of Hispanic Heritage Month, which ended October 15th, guest speaker Dr. Letitia Ferry, the Bristol-Myers Squibb Global People and Business Resource Group lead, gave a presentation entitled Being Latino in the U.S., and Commission member Angelique Acevedo defined the difference between the terms Latino and Hispanic. The former is derived from the Latin word for Spain. People from Spain and the Spanish-speaking countries of the Americas are considered Hispanic. Latino is a short version of the term Latino Americano, the Spanish word for Latin American. It includes people with Portuguese roots such as Brazilians, and in Europe, even people, Italians and Romanians and French Italians, are considered Latin, and she described that as people who talk with their hands and things like that. So, but she gave some interesting statistics on the growth of Latino population in the U.S. There are 62 million Latinos today in the U.S., and there will be nearly 100 million by 2050. And they have a great contribution to the gross national product. They might be just behind France in terms of gross national product, if you measured what they did. And so those numbers in terms of the population might have a great influence on Tuesday's election. We'll have to see. The other item on their agenda was from Commission member Kevin Antoine, who is the Chief Diversity and Equity and Inclusion Officer at the Bucks County Community College. He announced that LGBTQ History Month begins, I think today maybe. In honor of that, Mr. Antoine's office at the Bucks County Community College hosted a virtual panel, they did that today, entitled The Next Chapter in American Civil and Human Rights. I missed that, sorry to say, but maybe there's an archive somewhere. That's all I have, thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Davis.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I have this week's upcoming programs with Parks and Rec. We have acrylic pouring, skateboarding, tone and strengthen virtual exercise, hot process soap making for beginners, and Prince and Princess Ballet for preschoolers. And I also wanted to mention that Newtown Rotary, in conjunction with the Exchange Club, is doing a food drive this weekend. So Saturday, the 31st, 9 a.m. to 3 p.m., if you go over to McCaffrey's, there'll be people standing out front collecting items for, most of it goes to the Wrightstown Food Cupboard, so it's local, helps local people that are in need. So and we do about twice a year. So if you feel like you can contribute, look for us at McCaffrey's on Saturday. And that's all I have, Mr. Chairman. Thanks.
What kind of goods are they, canned goods or what?
Yeah, there's a list. I don't have it on me, unfortunately. You know, they'll take anything pretty much, but there'll be a list we'll have there. We usually have big placards with things that they're looking for.
Gotcha.
At the time. We usually have flyers, but I'm not sure how that's going to go with handout with COVID stuff going on. So, but
I work at a food bank, so it would be like cereal, peanut butter, canned tuna, canned vegetables, anything in cans.
Non-perishables.
Non-perishables.
Okay, excellent.
But those are the popular ones. Cereal.
Very good. Mr. Oxley.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The EDC have an upcoming meeting, but some of the members and myself have been still pushing the agenda for Newtown to be on the top of the list for certain sector companies that might be looking to relocate from surrounding states, and also relocating as they continue, some startup biotech and pharma companies that might be growing and needing more space in our, that they may need more space. So looking to make sure that we are prepared to be first on that list of desirable places for those companies to land, which would generate a tremendous amount of revenue for our township. So that is what we continue to do. We have an upcoming meeting, so I'll have a better report at our next meeting. Thank you.
Excellent. Just keep us up to date, and hopefully you're successful at that. It'll be fantastic.
Thank you.
I'm sorry.
Mr. Chairman,
yeah.
When Kyle made his announcement, it reminded me that we have for Saturday morning also the financial town hall. That we're planning to hold it in this room. Right now, it's at 9:30 on Saturday, 9:30 to 11. Stephen Ray from ESI is here to help answer questions about their report, and we will have I think there'll be a natural discussion that would go into the budget implications and the manager's budget.
Any time limit on it?
9:30 to 11.
Okay.
And there is one caveat, and that is, right now we only have 3 people signed up. There is a pre-registration procedure, just so we know whether we need to to do it on Zoom rather than in the room, but we'll be lucky. We are planning that if we don't get at least 10 people, 10-person minimum, then we will cancel the event. But you have until tomorrow noon to sign up, and you pre-register by contacting Olivia Gavenko.
So can I ask a question? I mean, I think you just said the pre-registration was sort of required in case there were too many people.
Right.
And we had to go to Zoom. It doesn't seem like there are going to be too many people. There are going to be too few. So why can't somebody just walk in without registering?
They could, and I could be here.
Okay.
At this point, if there's really that gauging the interest, if there's not an interest, then I don't want to take Mr. Ray's time up either.
Well, that's true. I mean, so if you're saying at least 10 people have to show up?
Yep.
But we don't know, you're saying 10 people have to register.
That was the plan, yes.
And well, I don't think that's really likely, given we only have a little bit more time.
At the moment. So, I mean, I don't want to make that decision until tomorrow, though. Overnight, and by virtue of my announcing it, and I'll announce it again at the end. That was what my plan was, but
Okay. Who do they contact? How do they register?
through Olivia Kavenko on the Township website, you can find her name.
I'm sorry, how do they do that?
Olivia K. At, what's the suffix, Mr. Lewis?
It's Olivia K. at newtownpa.gov.
newtownpa.gov.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, thank you. Reports of officials. As you can see, our engineer is not here tonight because she did not have a report, so we let her stay home. We'll go into the solicitor's report.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. First item on our report this evening is approval by the board of the written decision for the Goldberger-Kelly conditional use. Recall at your last meeting, we held a conditional use hearing for the property at 26 Eagle Road to convert what are currently professional doctor's offices into 2 residences. We prepared the decision, and if the board wishes, it would be a motion to approve that written decision.
Such a motion?
So moved.
Second?
Second.
Motion is second. Any questions from the board? Mr. Sander, I have one question. Maybe I just didn't see it, but didn't we also discuss that I know it would not be converted to condominiums, but it would not be converted to commercial use also. Is that true?
Yes, I'm looking at the...
I didn't, maybe I missed it, but is it in here?
I thought there was. Let me see.
It's all the condominium.
Yeah, J, condominium. I thought it would be right after that.
No, I thought there was... It says no business may be conducted on the property or in either residential unit.
Okay.
It's letter I.
That'll cover that then?
Yep.
Okay. That's all I had.
Yeah, this is strictly for residential use.
Any other questions? Any questions from the public? Seeing none, I'll call the question. All those in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Passes 5-0.
Thank you. Second item is the reserve at Makefield. Developer has requested an escrow release from its financial security. CKS Engineers has inspected and determined that it is appropriate to recommend to the board the certificate of completion number 5 in the amount of $136,103. And for the board's information, that will still leave remaining in escrow $245,324.63. If the board's of a mind, it would be a motion to approve certificate of completion number 5 in the amount of $136,103.
Have such a motion?
So moved.
Do I have a second? Motion is second. Any questions from the board? From the public? Seeing none, I'll call the question. All those in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Passes 5-0.
Thank you. Final item on our report are the 2 zoning hearing board applications that Mr. Fiddler reported on previously. They are both residential and they are both relatively small variance requests, dimensional variance requests. Does the board wish to take a position on either one?
Board wish to take any position or leave this up to the zoning hearing board? Hearing no response, I think.
Hearing none, I will take that as a no, and that completes our report. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. On to the manager's report.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. General fund balance as of this evening is $2,069,556. Plan expirations before the board with no action required. And we have Chief Forsythe to give his updated report. Evening, Chief.
Good evening, everyone. First, I would like to submit our September fire report. We had a total of 121 calls for service. We completed 57 annual fire safety inspections in Newtown Township, 52 in Newtown Borough. For our training, the Fire Association had 115 hours of training. NESD, the Emergency Services Department, had 151. In your packet, I noted the municipality which the fire calls existed in. Our highlighted events for September, thanks to Evan and Chief Hearn, we presented Matthew Menino and Kaylee Sipple the citation for accommodation for the life-saving attempt at Newtown Crossing back in June. Micah and Supervisor Fisher were there. It was well attended, and I appreciated everybody showing up for that. Friday, September 25th, the township officials and the borough officials met for the first time to discuss the future of the fire service and try to come up with a fire service agreement. So that is our report for the month of September.
Chief, any response from the borough in regards to the agreement?
I have not heard anything. I know that Dave and Mike and I have been working on the footprint of it. I don't know if it's been, I think the last I seen it was going to be forwarded to you and Mr. Fisher.
Yeah, in fact, this evening, Mr. Chairman, I made some changes, revisions on that based on some input from the staff reviewing it, and I sent that back out. So it'll be reviewed, and I assume we'd be ready to bring that forward at the next meeting. Obviously, we have to send it to the borough to see what they say, but that's the status.
Perfect.
Okay. Any further questions?
I'm sorry, can you clarify what that is all about? I'm sorry, I completely missed that.
It's an agreement between the township and the borough for the township to provide fire services to the borough and the borough to pay the township for those services.
Is that the 20% that you're asking to cover expenses?
That's part of it, yes.
And you're saying that there is some kind of draft written up?
There's a draft that's being reviewed by staff right now. I don't think so. That's the NFA agreement, right? Yeah. No, it's not. It's in draft form with the staff.
So we haven't seen it yet?
Correct.
And it goes before the borough, before it comes to us, is that?
Well, no, it'll come to you. You can review it and approve it, but that doesn't mean anything if the borough doesn't agree.
No, where we left off with the discussion was that we would come up with a draft and then congregate again with the borough in the beginning of probably next year to begin discussing the agreement and negotiating. So nothing will come before the board until it's sort of agreed upon by both parties.
My apologies on that. I was pushing it too quickly.
Negotiating, how's that going?
We've only had preliminary discussions, so it was a cordial conversation.
Because I remember having cordial preliminary discussions maybe a year and a half, 2 years ago almost.
Well, right. So that's where we're at. Right.
We're still at that point.
Yep.
Okay.
I think we got a little bit further because we're drawing up an official document that we have something to work with.
That's correct.
So I think we're the next step, and I think the next meeting we can start and then negotiate a number or however the board wants to handle it.
So that's what you would call a framework, I guess.
Yes.
Okay.
And if you remember, that was one of ESI's recommendations to look at regional services.
Yeah, well, we didn't need them to tell us that because, like I said,
right.
we were already doing it.
It gives us a little extra push.
Anything else for the chief?
The next thing I have is the bylaw amendment that the Fire Association is going to make where the Township Fire Chief would become the fire chief for the Newtown Fire Association. That has been presented to you folks. I think this is a huge step for the Emergency Services Department and the Fire Association. As you know, in 2018, we had a fire study done. The Fire Association has taken numerous steps to try to put in effect some of the recommendations that Mr. Carter made. And this is one of the biggest ones that even when Kurt Ferguson was here, we were trying to start this process, and I think it's a huge thing for the Fire Association to take this step. As you all know, there's a big concern for volunteers. Matt, Chief Gerhardt, is going to take a leave of absence only as the chief. We're not letting him out the door. And I think it's important that we do this, and I think it's the first step in bringing our two departments together as one. So it was suggested that this come before the board because I am a township employee, and to take this position, we would like your authorization to do this.
Mr. Chairman, if I may, the appropriate motion would be a motion to approve the proposed revision to the Newtown Fire Association bylaws to name the Newtown Fire Chief the Chief of the NFA, conditioned upon the NFA approval of the bylaw change.
Such a motion? Second?
I can second it.
Motion and second. Any questions from the board?
I have a quick one, and then I was lucky to be there on Monday night and have them go through this, and so my study time for reading through all this was helped by sitting at a meeting and doing my studying at the same time. There were just a few changes, and the changes were all reflecting the chief of the department.
Yes, the organizational chart will now be the Township Fire Chief will be the chief of the department. The volunteers will have a deputy chief, and we're going to have 2 battalion chiefs. In that situation, a battalion chief will be assigned to Station 55, which is across the Municipal Complex Drive, and the other battalion chief will be in charge of the station at Station 45, which is located in the borough. That's really the basic change. It's a long amendment. It goes into the jobs and duties of all the elected officers of the Fire Association, but I think the important part is us agreeing to do this.
I don't think we mentioned that the membership did vote on this.
Yes, the membership, the first reading was Monday night at the Fire Association meeting. It'll be voted on at the November meeting, and then it'll go into effect. The bylaw change is proposed to go into effect on January 1st of 2021.
I know there's several major other changes, and I wasn't able to find all the changes that the item number 2 on this document references, like change in Article 2, and Article 3, and Article 4, and Article 5. Can we just summarize what those changes are? Can you do that for me?
I'm sorry, Article 2 is the membership. In this article, there used to be a a position in the firehouse to be a fire police officer. We have deleted that because municipalities now, the fire police officers come under the control of the police department. And unfortunately, like our lack of volunteers, we don't have any fire police, so we've deleted that from our bylaws.
What does a fire police do exactly?
Quite honestly, they control traffic at fire scenes. It is the worst job in the world. And unfortunately, a lot of our retired firefighters become fire cops, and unfortunately, we don't have any that can help us right now. So it's better that these positions are controlled by the police departments anyway because of certain liabilities.
Okay. I guess they do that anyway, right?
I'm sorry?
The police department helped you out anyway?
Yes.
At the scene?
Yeah.
Okay. Article 3, officers, you mentioned something about the
Article
battalion
3,
chiefs. Is that what that is?
Article 3, we deleted the Fire Association chief and put in there the Township Fire Chief will act as the chief. And we also added a battalion chief to the chain of command.
And what's Article 4 on the nomination?
Article 4 under nominations is our process to nominate. Currently, there are certain guidelines that you have to meet to be eligible to be a chief officer in the Fire Association. We've changed that to where it doesn't have to go to the general membership for the approval of someone that doesn't have the qualifications. It used to be that the membership would make the decision if that person could run or not. The change in the bylaws is that will be done by the executive committee.
Okay.
So that's the only change there. Article 5, the committees, we added one person to our executive committee.
What committee? I'm sorry, I didn't hear that.
The executive board committee.
Okay.
That consists of all the elected officers of the Fire Association. We added the Relief Association president because he attends all of our meetings, and the Relief Association is a large part of the Fire Association, so we added him as a member of the committee.
And I guess duties of officers, you changed something?
Article 6 is duties of the officers. We refer to that because of the change that the fire chief would actually be the township fire chief, and they would set the duties of the deputy chief and the 2 battalion chiefs.
Okay. Thanks for explaining. Thank you very much.
It's very long. Warren, our president, did a great job in the revision of the bylaw amendment, so it's something that seems to be a good idea.
I know, I just didn't want to read the whole thing. Thank you.
That's all right. That's all right. The last thing I have is the fire service agreement between Newtown Township and NFA, Newtown Fire Association.
I'm sorry, did we take a vote?
Oh, yeah,
No,
you're right.
There was no call.
I was so enthralled by all the articles, so I totally forgot. We have a motion and a second. Any further questions from the board on the bylaws amendment from the public? Seeing none, I'll call the question. All those in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Passes 5-0. Yes, sir.
I'm trying to hurry because Evan took so much of my time tonight. It's okay, Evan. The last thing I have is the fire service agreement between Newtown Township and NFA, the Newtown Fire Association. Myself and President Dallas and Micah have worked several hours on this. We have made some provisions, some changes. This fire service agreement will be a 5-year agreement. It will go into effect on January of 2021 and expire December 31st of 2025. An additional change that we made in here was the annual contribution by the township would be discussed with the township manager and the board every year so that we can come up with a good figure. The reason we pushed for a 5-year agreement was there's sometimes some concern on both parts, whether the fire association is going to leave or the township is going to leave their support. So I think it gives the fire association a lot more security and us knowing that we have a 5-year deal. Some of the other changes that if you look at the last agreement, we took a lot of the training requirements out of it. The training requirements are still there because we're still mandated by the association to complete the refresher and recertification classes. The other thing that we took out was the hours of service. We did this for a number of reasons. It clearly says now that NFA will provide first line fire suppression when NESD, Newtown Emergency Services, is not on duty. We did this because the prior agreements all had, except for holidays and this time and that time, this will take a lot of the discussion out if we continue and we extend our service hours, whatever it may be. It won't be something that we'll have to go back and change the agreement prior to the expiration of it. That is basically the difference. The contribution for 2021 is $160,000. And as I said, that will be negotiated every year between the board and the Fire Association.
Mr. Chairman, if I may, the appropriate motion would be motion to approve the fire services agreement with the Newtown Fire Association.
Such a motion? Got a second?
Second.
Got a motion and a second. Any questions from the board?
I do. And I will note that the Fire Association, I believe, did take a vote on this and accepted it.
Yes.
At the end of the meeting, there was a little bit of a discussion. And there was expressed some sensitivity to the fact that this year's contribution was $175,000, and next year's contribution is $160,000. I was asked for an explanation. I wasn't in the room when that was done, or when that was discussed and negotiated. So I promised that I would ask the question this evening.
Well, the reason for the $160,000 is NFA agreed to that number, as well as trying to save some costs for the township.
Okay. And it was agreed upon.
I have a question related to that. I mean, the $160,000 that you have in the proposed budget, we haven't agreed to that budget yet. So basically, we haven't agreed to the $160,000 as of yet.
Correct.
And so I don't see how we can agree to this contract, 5-year contract that says $160,000 in 2021, which is binding on us. The contract or the budget?
That's something.
Contract.
So I would say we're not in a position to okay this contract until we finalize the budget. If you're putting a number in there, and another question I have related to that, this is a 5-year contract, but you said this number can be renegotiated, whatever it is, can be renegotiated every year?
On an annual basis, yes.
So it doesn't say that in the contract here.
John, it says that the amount of funds the township will provide to the NFA for operations in subsequent years of this agreement shall be approved by the Board of Supervisors each year.
I understand that. I mean, it implies, but I would think you want to put into concrete terms that the amount could change depending upon the decision of the supervisors, I guess.
Well, I think that's... Sure.
All right. But I still think you're putting the cart before the horse here in terms of putting that number in this contract. If it's binding, then
well, again,
we have no further discussion of this.
I thought I heard it the other way around.
When it comes to the budget.
If we agree to it now, then I think we're agreeing for it in the budget. We won't touch it in the budget. That's what I'm.
That's correct.
Is that what you're thinking?
Yeah.
All right.
Chief Forsythe, does anything in this agreement hinge on our potential working with the borough?
No, sir, it does not.
Okay. Does the borough have a separate fire services agreement?
They do not, and that was discussed Monday night at the general membership meeting of the Fire Association.
Okay. So can I assume that we're given the $160,000 and they're giving how much? How much did they agree to? I mean, again, everybody's saying a contract, which was, from what I understand, unanimously agreed upon. But what did the borough bring to the table?
Well, the borough brought to the table $29,000 or $32,000 for the workers' comp.
Of which they do every year.
Correct.
By regulated to do, is that
And
correct?
the other was $23,000 extra dollars.
Okay. So we're giving 160, they're giving 23 extra besides workman's
The
comp.
workers' comp, yes.
But there is no agreement voted on or signed for.
There is not as of this point.
Okay. I mean, that is what I worry about more than us signing this agreement. Because we're holding up our end of it. I don't see any rock solid contract or agreement from the borough holding up their end.
I agree with what you're saying, but this is something that we started in 2012, and unfortunately the borough wasn't part of it then, and I think the NFA is going to pursue a fire service agreement with the borough.
Anything else?
Chief, do you think that's going to happen, or are you confident that that will be something that will be addressed?
Well, I'm confident that there will be a fire service agreement between the Fire Association and the borough. Again, I think it's going to be the same thing in the borough that happens here. I don't know what the dollar amount will be. I wish I did. Again, I think that's what we have to work on.
And that's apart from the discussion the township is having with the borough.
That's correct.
About emergency services.
That's correct.
But that conversation is kind of like being kind of like
it's a rollover,
white gloved, or I mean, it's not one where we have based upon what I've heard. Remember, I've only been on this board 7-8 months now, and we've had these discussions many a times with the borough, and they're never to no avail, correct?
Correct.
So we have to kind of have some sort of not certainty, but level of confidence that they are willing to work in good faith, because, from what Mr. Chairman just said, we're putting up a certain amount of assets here, funds, and we don't have any certainty on their end of what they're willing to do, and it might be potentially the same thing again, so I'm not sure. I mean, what do you think?
Well, I would just like to say to the townships and the fire association's agreement, it is extremely important that we have a fire service agreement with Newtown Fire Association, because number one, we do not own a piece of fire apparatus. We use the fire apparatus that's owned by the Fire Association every day that we're on duty. Number two, we do not have a firehouse. Our headquarters is the firehouse that's owned by the Fire Association. So I think it's imperative that we have a good fire service agreement with the Fire Association, because without them, emergency services will not function.
Thank you.
Well, why don't you just change this to say the township will provide a certain amount of funds to be negotiated each year?
That's fine with me.
I mean, because I really want to have a discussion about this in the budget part, and I don't want to agree to this because of that.
Well, I'm open for suggestions.
I mean, I know we need an agreement. Okay, I'm not disputing that, but I think we should talk about the budget before this, and we could still do it.
What kind of timeline are we on? I mean, I would think it has to be in place sooner than later. But this takes effect January 1st, right?
It takes effect January 1st, but the Fire Association is not going anywhere. And certainly if you want to increase our contribution, the Fire Association contribution, we're certainly fine with that. But I think it's really important that we understand that my department cannot function without an agreement with the Fire Association. We cannot do it. So
Again, I'm not saying we don't want an agreement. I'm just disputing the number that's been put in there.
I'm fine with that.
And the number was agreed upon by the Fire Association, correct? The 160?
Yes.
Okay. Any further questions from the board? From the public? Yes, sir.
You have to go up, yeah.
You gotta go up there.
Frank McCarron, 42 Rittenhouse Circle. Northampton Township implemented a program in 2019 at a cost of $100,000 per year to reimburse volunteers who agreed to be on call during evening and weekend hours. And the administration of Northampton Township said in a letter of transmittal of the 2020 budget to its Board of Supervisors dated November 7, 2019, this program has worked well and ensures that sufficient personnel are available during fire calls. I gather from last week's meeting that you did not get the SAFER grant for this year to hire weekend firefighters. And I know I had a conversation, a Facebook chat with the NFA that they were having trouble covering weekends. So has the township considered anything such as what Northampton Township is doing for this year, because if you haven't gotten your SAFER grant, to make sure that you have weekend coverage, that you have your volunteers on call? That's my question.
Thank you. Any further comments from the public? So I have a motion and a second on the floor. I will call the question. All those in favor of approving this agreement?
Aye.
Aye. Aye. Did I hear 3 ayes?
4.
4.
Yes.
And those against?
Nay.
Passes 4 to 1. Thank you, Chief.
Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Thank you, Chief. Final item I have under my report, Mr. Chairman, is the consideration to approve the financing for an F-550, a Ford F-550 truck that was purchased this year for the Public Works Department. We solicited and received 2 rate quotes from 2 banks, one from Univest, one from TD Bank. Univest quote was for 3-year financing for 3.15% interest rate for a total payment of $7,097.70 per quarter. The rate quote we got from TD Bank was for 3 years for 2.99% and with a quarterly payment of $7,027.20. We had budgeted a total of $8,353 under the 2020 capital plan. So the appropriate motion would be motion to approve the financing for the F-550 utility through TD Equipment Finance Incorporated in the amount of $7,027 per quarter.
Do I have such a motion?
So moves.
Do I have a second?
Second.
Mr. Fisher, I think you caught some sort of typo in this.
Yeah,
Was it
I
taken
did
care
confer
of?
with Mr. Lewis. There was, in the
For an
loan
F?
agreement, they had it identified as an F-150.
Yeah, we saw that. That's a typo.
Okay.
As long as it doesn't affect.
Any,
But let's get that corrected.
Yeah, no, we've asked them to send over a new document.
Any other questions from the board?
This is for the Public Works Department?
Yes.
From the public? Seeing none, call the question. All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Passes 5-0.
That's all I have, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Mr. Mack, minutes, bills, lists, and reports.
Okay, I make a motion to approve the minutes of the October 14, 2020 Board of Supervisors meeting.
Do I have a motion? Do I have a second?
Second.
Do I have a motion and a second? Any questions from the board? From the public? Seeing none, call the question. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Passes 5-0.
I make a motion to approve the minutes of the October 19, 2020 budget meeting of the Board of Supervisors.
I have a motion. Do I have a second?
Second.
A motion is second. Any questions from the board, from the public? Seeing none, I'll call the question. All those in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Passes 5-0.
Oh, bills list?
Bills list, yes, sir.
I make a motion that we approve the payment of our bills according to the bills list dated October 28, 2020, totaling $796,554.47.
Motion, do I have a second?
Second.
Motion is second. Any questions from the board on the bills list?
I just have one thing in there. There's a Verizon franchise fee of $629.41 on page 5. Is that related to, we received some kind of notification that we have to renew the franchise, but it wasn't ready yet? I'm not understanding.
Yes, that is the payment to the Bucks County Consortium for them to negotiate with Verizon for the cable franchise agreement.
So that agreement is to do things like Channel 40, which didn't work last couple of weeks.
Yes, but that is a free component to the cable franchise agreement. Essentially what the cable franchise agreement is for them to do maintenance and to occupy the rights of way to run the cable lines to your house.
And they give us money for that?
Yes.
How much money do they give us?
I believe it's $496,000 a year combined.
Wow, that's a lot of dough.
Is that combined with the Comcast franchise as well?
Mm-hmm.
And they're going to go out of business, maybe, I read, in 5 years out of the cable business. Does that mean it's going to be Xfinity only, or what?
I don't know. that I don't know.
So in 5 years, could we be out $500,000 from this somehow?
If the nature of the cable industry changes to that extent, potentially.
All right, that's just an interesting point. Thank you.
And remember, half of that was Comcast, and if they still continue.
Forget about Comcast.
Okay. Any further questions from the board?
I actually did have a question, but John's discussion kind of, I know what it was. I did notice a bill in there, or a check in there for the final payment to the Newtown Fire Association. That's our third payment this year.
Yes, that's correct, with the current, in accordance with the current agreement.
Yep.
Okay. Any other questions from the bills list? Any questions from the public? Seeing none, call the questions. All those in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Passes 5-0.
Finally, I move that we approve the interfund transfers as per the bills list dated October 28, 2020, totaling $206,360 and no cents.
No cents. Motion, do I have a second?
Second.
Motion is second. Any questions from the board? From the public? Seeing none, I'll call the question. All those in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Passes 5-0. Thank you, Mr. Mack. We'll move on to our second session of public comment. Anybody want to have anything to say, please come up to the podium.
Warren Dallas, Newtown Fire Association. First, I'd like to thank Evan, a great presentation, and thank you for all that you and the ambulance squad does for Newtown and for the Fire Association. Also like to thank the board for approving both the bylaws change, which we call the One Chief Initiative. It's been many months in trying to work this, and actually 8 years from the time that Chief Forsythe was selected was kind of inevitable. That was where we were heading towards. So it's good to finally get there. For all the work that went into it was well worth it. I'd like to thank Chief Forsythe and Chief Gerhardt in helping put that together, along with Mr. Lewis and our solicitor. It's good to get that finished. And the same with the fire service agreement. We appreciate the sureties of the 5 years. We've been kind of just approving it every year, so it really makes the fire station feel a little bit more secure, that we don't have to worry about what's going to happen next year all the time. So that is a very good thing also. And a lot of work went into that. And the kind of the one chief thing helped to fit into that perfectly too. So this was good timing for all that. So I'd like to once again thank the board for that.
John D. April, Newtown Grant, biggest and the best. Glad to see you back. Glad to see you back. Except for you, John. It's a good thing because the Zoom meetings, the quality of the audio, like for the last few of them, was really terrible. I mean, you know, you got a really good voice, David, and you got two supervisors that are okay, and there's two supervisors that speak like they have a mouthful of mashed potatoes. And that's not good, especially, you know, with the audio bad, and now with the masks, it's terrible. So I hope you don't mind. I took mine off because everyone that came up here with a mask sounded muffled, sounded terrible, especially when you're old. The main reason why I came up here is, you know, I don't know if you're aware of it or not. There's one supervisor that's real heavy with social media, and he spreads his biased opinions all over the place, and he's totally working against the rest of you supervisors, I think. You know, he wants to get involved in everything with the, I mean, rightfully so in some cases, but he wants to vet the person himself. I mean, he's gone as far as saying he didn't want any women, he didn't want any lawyers. It's kind of prejudice to me. I mean, you know, there is a second-class township. I think there is an article 403. It says about not working along with the other supervisors. You know, remove them, and that's the way I feel. Thank you, John.
Okay. Anyone else for public comment? Sure, go ahead. Thank you.
My name is Frank McCarran, 42 Rittenhouse Circle, Newtown. I want you to know that my reasons for appearing at this podium have nothing to do with any particular views that you believe I may have about cutting township spending. Before I retired, I was the chief financial officer of a publicly traded company with $4 billion in revenues. I had a hand in successfully turning around some well-known consumer-branded businesses. I wanted to share a businessman's perspective about the financial issues that you are facing, and I hoped it would not be taken poorly. When I appeared before this board on August 26th, I said that eConsult's proposed scenario 3 would result in a total property tax increase for residents of Delancey Court of $51,000 per year. If last week's proposal is implemented, that $51,000 will become $63,000, or just over $500 per home per year in our community. Last week it was suggested that this increase is really not so bad if you look at it in comparison to monthly HOA fees. But as I said to you in August, the township has already taken advantage of our HOA fees by allowing developers to build non-conforming roads, which force homeowners in communities such as Delancey Court to have to pay for snow plowing and road repairs that should be the responsibility of the township. That's a win-win for the developer and the township, and the argument has been up to now that affected homeowners still are ahead because the township's millage rate was so low. Now, if the township was willing to take over road maintenance at Delancey Court, then I would be willing to look at this increase through the prism that had been suggested last week. Last week, you also received email comments about your finances, and you seem to be wondering why they were all from Delancey Court. The reason why is that phase 1 of your communications plan was to reach out to HOAs. HOAs were asked to bring residents up to speed on the township's finances, and that's exactly what our HOA president did at a meeting 2 weeks ago. But it turns out that the township doesn't have the contact information for a lot of HOAs. In our case, I told our HOA about the township's communications plan. So if you're not hearing from residents in other communities, then maybe because our HOAs are not hearing from you. As for last week's presentation specifically, my first observation from last week's budget presentation is to conclude that eConsult has overstated the millage rates in all of the scenarios in their final report. The reason for that is eConsult started with a bad estimate for the 2020 year-end general fund balance. eConsult was told by the township that the projected 2020 ending fund balance would be $1 million, but we learned last week that it will be $1.9 million. Mr. Lewis can verify my math, but I backed into this new number based on what was disclosed last week as projected 2021 revenues, expenditures, and ending fund balance. If eConsult had the correct estimate when they prepared their final report, they would have redone the math and reduced the amount of the proposed tax increase in each scenario accordingly. So now that we know that eConsult had a bad estimate, if the township has the models, you can correct the scenarios yourselves. But it would be much cleaner if you could ask eConsult to update their final report. And from there, with the correct starting point, you can better judge the effects on millage rates of the other budget proposals that were made last week. My second observation is that by implementing scenario 2 and not scenario 3, that means the township is telling residents not to expect any additional funds from Newtown Borough for the fire department over the next 5 years. Now, I understand you have had some preliminary discussions, but by saying you're going with scenario 2 and not scenario 3, you're saying you have no confidence in getting anything from them. And so I think you should ask the township why they're recommending that. My third observation is to remind you that scenario 2 calls for another tax increase in 2024. So it's not just 12.49 mils in 2021 and you are done. By saying that the township intends to implement scenario 2, the township is telling residents to expect another tax increase in 2024. And I would like to point out that scenario 2 calls for a millage rate of 12 mils, not 12.49 mils. eConsult said specifically that all of its scenarios assumed there would be no increase in millage rates for other funds. But that's just one of the changes to scenario 2 that was mentioned last week, which leads me to my next observation. Last week's proposal had so many changes to scenario 2 that what the township is really recommending is an entirely new scenario, and therefore has to model out an entirely new 5-year forecast. eConsult gave you a scenario 2 on which they said you could spend $1 million more in 2021 than you had ever spent in any year before. If the township is going to modify that scenario to spend $600,000 more than that, well, that additional increase must be rolled forward and reflected in expenditures over the following 4 years. And until the township revises the 5-year forecast, you don't know what kind of tax increase you really need, whether in 2021 or in 2024. So besides the 2021 budget, make sure you are given a new 5-year forecast. And my final observation is about one of the most significant changes mentioned last week, which has to do with the fire department. I gather that the township did not receive a SAFER grant to hire new firefighters and intends to reapply next year. The one financial benefit is that it helps your 5-year forecast, as the delay in hiring new firefighters drops off a year of cost from the forecast. But it also makes it a priority to keep volunteers available on weekends, and I don't see how cutting the township's contribution to the NFA would do that. And if you decide to earmark the $900,000 increase in the township's 2020 year-end general fund balance towards the 5-year effects of the proposals presented to you last week, rather than put those funds aside in case you don't get a SAFER grant next year, then you better be very confident that you are going to get that SAFER grant. If I were you, I would want to know why you didn't get the grant this year and why the next application will be different. I would talk to Northampton Township, which was awarded a SAFER grant a year ago to hire weekend firefighters. I would also talk to Warminster Township, which was awarded a $1.8 million SAFER grant a month ago to hire 5 weekday firefighters. And thinking outside the box, the answer might be to convince Newtown Borough, which does not have a career fire department, to apply for the SAFER grant instead of the township, as the borough can say that they rely solely on volunteers and other neighboring townships for fire services. That way, the township bears the cost of 5 days of career firefighters, the borough bears the cost of 2 days of career firefighters, and both benefit from the NFA supplying the firehouses, the fire trucks, and the fire equipment. Thank you.
Can I ask you a question, a clarification?
Sure.
I think you mentioned that because the budget doesn't follow any of the scenarios that the ESI recommended, specifically scenario 2, that there's down the road, we don't really have a 5-year plan. Is that what you're saying?
I'm saying that if you're showing that your expenditures in scenario 2 were 13.4 million, you're spending 13.94 million, and that your revenues over expenditures in scenario 2 is supposed to be like 500,000, but in this proposal it's 200,000. There are a lot of changes going on here. So you need to model out what are those changes and what do they mean year over year. If you're spending an extra 600,000 this year, which of those costs are you rolling forward that you just have to build an inflationary cost to? Which ones are adjustments, where you're giving salary adjustments or promotions, and roll that out, and then which ones are just changes in the methodology. Because, eConsult's methodology, what they said to you was that we believe that 2021 is unique. Normally what we would do is just take 2020's budget and bump it by 3%. But given what happened with COVID, we're telling you to take 2020 actuals as the adjusted new normal, and we adjusted that. And originally in the interim report, they took that 12.3 from the 12.2 or 12.3 from the actuals, and they added 3%, so it was 12.6. Then, in between the interim and the final, something must have discussed that 12.6 became 13 million, and of course, in scenario 2, it's 13.4, and now you're at 13.94. So there are a lot of changes here. You have a totally different scenario. You need to model out what all those changes are in the next 5 years and what kind of increase you're looking for. And before you do that, I think you have an extra 900,000. That's really not part of one of these scenarios. That's correcting an estimate of your opening cash balance and recomputing what those scenarios 1, 2, and 3, as well as the baseline, would require in a tax increase. So that way, you have your starting point, you make your adjustments. I'm hoping they gave you the model that you can do all this. So.
Well, I'm hoping that we have this meeting on Saturday at 9:30, where the ESI consultants will be here.
I'm not going to be here, so.
That's too bad.
Yeah.
Okay,
so.
Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. McCarron, if you will indulge me. I know you don't represent all of Delancey Court, maybe just a few people that you're in your clique or whatever you want to call it.
I don't represent anyone.
Now, are you trying to tell me the people of Delancey Court cannot afford a tax increase?
They are generally not for a tax increase.
Okay.
They feel
then
that.
Why do they absorb a 4 to almost 5% increase every year from the school district, which amounts to maybe 450 every year?
Right.
I looked on the charts. And what does the school district give you? Police protection, fire protection, anything like that?
Nothing.
Whereas we're asking for a tax increase to maintain your quality of life over there in Delancey Court.
Right.
852,000, 840,000, 852,000. These are the prices of the homes. 806,000. And when I calculate what would be paid over the course of the year per day, it's an average of $2.50 per day to have the protection that we provide you for the $850,000 homes that you live in. But
so,
you're telling me it's unfair that we shouldn't be doing it. Now, you're age restricted, no children in the school district, but the school district charges you the most in the taxes. Whereas maybe you should be organizing and going to the school district and trying to get some sort of reduction from them, since you're using none of their services. But the township providing you, now that's as of for one property, minus what you would be paying the township, they would be paying another $9,456 in taxes. We would be collecting $822 for the year to give you police protection, fire protection, EMS when they come to, if they have to service you. But all you're concerned is that your streets are not dedicated, which was the option of your developer.
Well, you say it's
There
the
are plenty
option,
of properties here that are not dedicated roads, of which they pay their association fee to take care of that. I think yours may be 390 or somewhere in that, of which you pay per month. We're asking for something over the course of the year. Now,
So,
if you don't think
can
that's,
I
if you don't
respond to
think
that?
that's proper,
Can I
we will
respond to
try to
that?
pass a budget without any of this and
Can I
let
respond?
it be.
Can I respond?
Yes, go right ahead.
Okay. So this, Delinquency Court was completed in 2016, except for Toll Brothers hasn't figured that out yet, okay? So, but it was completed in 2016.
You know the whole history of Delancey Court, don't you? The original builder. and what
2009
happened.
McGrath.
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay, and Toll Brothers was basically your angel that bailed them out. Or else they still be banging in nails over there.
Okay.
I know because I live right next door.
Okay, okay, and you know that I mentioned last time I was here that Toll Brothers has not yet repaired the roads. Trees are dead for 4 years, but putting that aside. So this community was completed in 2016. Individuals who moved in knew about the school taxes and knew school taxes were going to go up each year. Why did they want to live in Newtown? They liked it because they found it semi-rural, and they said, well, you know, I want to be near my kids and grandkids. I know I'm going to pay the school taxes, but I want to be near them. At least the millage rate is low. The millage rate was 2.5 mils, and then it went to 3.5, and now it went to 4.5, and now it's going to go to 12.49. And we have some sophisticated people in our township, and frankly, we don't believe that's the end of it in our community. We're very concerned that this is not the end. You think that this is a panacea, 12.49, and we're done. And we don't believe that. So that's a general consensus in our development. So as for the roads, you know, there's a misunderstanding. Some people thought that, well, it's still being developed, so Toll Brothers is plowing it. Not that, because our roads are narrower than standard. Narrower should be cheaper to take care of, cheaper to plow, cheaper to repave, but because they're narrower than standard, that means the non-conforming, the township doesn't have to take dedication. So there's frustration with the continued increase, concern there'll be more increase, frustration with Toll Brothers and trying to get them out, get them to finish up, and the feeling that the township has not been there for us for that. You talked about fire and police. We don't think you've been there for us in terms of trying to complete this. And so I'm just telling you, I mean, I put this here, and as I said before, I'm not appearing here to try to give you a hard time. I have a businessman's perspective. I presented what I presented, and you can act on that.
From your perspective, no tax increase is necessary.
I did not say that. I did not say that. I did not say that. There's a baseline forecast that has a tax increase.
Maybe I'm a fortunate one. I live here for 33 years. And there hasn't been a tax increase until now in this substantial amount. So when people move into a township, it's just like, I'll use not even a hypothetical, I'll use an example.
Wait.
As when I moved
you have known about Lockheed Martin since 2015.
Yeah.
And nothing's been done to solve that.
Well, I was told by my former board members that place would be occupied, which was a joke.
Okay, and I said
I was
to you,
told in the past that well, no, let me have my say. You seem to be the expert on the budget, but I know the history of the budget. And I've been told many times, oh, certain things are going to happen. We ran budgets based on hope. Oh, well, I hope it gets better. I hope this gets better. I hope that gets better. Whereas, in my opinion, there should have been incremental increases in the millage going back before 2015. But everybody hoped, we hope that Lockheed Martin will be occupied again, and we'll get all that money back. And we hope that no other township will institute an EIT, and we'll just keep generating EIT. But that hope never happened.
And you think that this plan that eConsult has given you is not a wing and a prayer plan?
This
That,
is something
that
that
ideas that have been talked about for years by your finance committee about the mixed-use center, that is somehow going to happen in 2024, 2025? I mean,
Nothing was listened to years ago, and that's what I'm trying to tell you.
Okay.
There was the prior boards were not interested in expanding. They were of the belief, cut costs and cut them down to the bare minimum. And we laid off people. We sold assets. That was what their philosophy was, which you're telling me continue to cut expenses.
Well, I've told you that eConsult has handed you a plan that said if you spend $13.4 million in 2021 and follow our plan, it'll work, putting aside whether that's right or not. And you're now looking at a proposal to raise that by $600,000 next year and trying to tell me that is somehow, I should be happy about that as a resident? I'm not.
Well, I would think that, well, you a businessman, that if our Moody's ratings went down, this $852,000 home might drop to $600,000.
I'm wondering what seniors are going to think of when they see this constantly going up rate, what they're going to think about our values of our home. I'm personally wondering that. I'm just saying, you're making a big deviation. Here's the bottom line. You're making a big deviation.
You moved in here never expecting that a tax increase would happen. You moved in here just thinking we could survive.
I did not move in here knowing that the township was in a financial crisis.
The cost of the township doesn't go up.
Excuse me.
It doesn't cost us money to run a township.
Last year, the township was bragging, and we've kept our millage rate so low. I mean, I did not know that you were in such financial dire straits, quite frankly.
Well, you should have asked.
I should ask. I just had to read the township communications, which says we're keeping our millage rate so low. So
and we're still one of the lowest in the county, even with the raise.
Yeah.
We're still one of the lowest.
Scenario 2 has an increase in 2024.
And one of the only townships that has a paid fire department.
Okay, we've had that discussion.
Those two aspects,
and my said is look at Northampton Township and follow their model and try to save some costs.
And they're the only ones that have, in this particular area, a paid fire department. They're higher than us in their tax base.
They have a model. You can follow that and save money. That's what I'm saying. And they give $100,000 to helping their volunteers. Look, I've suggested a lot of things, but it's not for me to, this is still for you. I don't think that a simple tax increase is the answer, but this is your decision, okay? I'm just saying right now, you don't know a tax increase. If you want to do these changes, you can do these changes, but you have to get a new model to know what that means over the next 5 years. You don't know it.
Mr. McCarron, just really quick, I'd like to share with you that I think our board knows that a potential tax increase isn't the only option or the only thing that we have to do. We do know that there's a recommendation for economic development, which we are working on effortlessly. And I know that there's other things that we're going to look at to make sure that we have enough revenue coming in from other options. So just keep that in consideration when you're pondering about the tax increase and so forth. It's a very difficult decision. We mentioned that at the budget presentation. It's something we have to deliberate on, and we're not even close to having an answer on that yet. But we understand your concerns. We understand the township residents' concerns. I mean, we all live here as well, so that impacts our financial wallet as well. So let's make sure that we all have cooler heads on this one. Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
And I had a quick request. If you could send some of those, there was a lot of numbers flying around there, and I was keeping with one concept, and then you'd start another. So is there a way you could send me what you wrote?
Sure.
I appreciate it.
Mr. Chairman? Mr. Chairman?
Yes.
There were, as you know, about 8 emails, comments, a lot from Delancey Court. Instead of reading them here, can I suggest, as we've done in the past, append them to the minutes of this meeting?
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Okay.
Mr. Chairman, I have a question, if I may.
Yes, sir.
Actually, you know what? I'll wait. Thank you. Never mind.
Okay. Well, we're on to the 2021 budget. We've kind of discussed it ad nauseum already. Mr. Lewis, I have a question in regards to a budget with no tax increase. Tell me a story.
Well, if there was a budget with no tax increase, any of the additional hires would be eliminated. Roughly $3 million in revenues would be lost. So the township would likely run out of money by the end of the year, to put it simply.
Where would that bring our general fund at the end of the year?
Negative numbers.
So it will be, everybody says deficit spending.
It would be worse than deficit spending. It would be, we're out of money, and essentially cease to operate.
And naturally lose a lucrative contract with a neighboring township.
Absolutely.
Possibly not negotiate a fire contract with a neighboring borough. So there's a lot of ramifications in this. If the board so desires, no tax increase. That's an option.
That is an option.
Well, there are other options, including a lesser tax increase. I mean, right now, with this tax increase, you're projecting that our balance at the end of the year 2021 would be 14% as a reserve fund, whereas in the past we've been saying 8 to 10% is good. If you even reduce this by a couple of millage, you'd still have a 12% reserve fund. So it's not a choice of raising it 7.99 mils or zero. It's maybe something else, let's just say. And I think that's what we should talk about a little bit, about things that we can do to ameliorate this increase. Because regardless of what wealth people have, you know, they're saying this is the wrong time to have such a great increase. Maybe it could be more incremental, and there are ways to do that. For example, the scenario 2 that ESI Consult recommended said we should hire 1 new police officer in 2021 and 2 in 2022. And what we're proposing is to hire all 3 in 2021. So we're not following the recommendation in that regard. And, you know, we could do things like that to require less funding for 2021 and see where we are and go to 2022. So I'm not saying we should eliminate hiring new police. I'm saying we had consultants, we paid them $40,000 or so, $60,000, right, out of our own pocket, and
$37,550.
Sorry?
$37,500.
$37,500, whatever. And you know, you also mentioned we're going to be doing other things to raise revenue. There's nothing in this budget that gives us a way to plan for, you know, raising more revenue. I mean, there is in this budget, for example, from the police department, $20,000 to see if we can plan for a new police building. I guess that's going to be used for consultants. I'm not sure what that $20,000 is going to be used for, but we don't have anything like that in the budget for how do you change the makeup of what do we need to do in the business commons, for example. I know we have the Economic Development Committee, but those are local businessmen. They're maybe not experts enough or not consultants. I mean, we had the finance committee, they made similar recommendations to ESI, but we chose to go with consultants. So I'm trying to think of what are we doing to get more revenue, and how are we planning to get that? There's nothing in this budget, and there was nothing really in the ESI report about how to do that, except some ideas about sharing resources with neighboring municipalities and so forth. And by the way, our two sister townships in the jointure, Upper Makefield and Wrightstown, have a lower millage rate than we do. I think it's around 4 to 6 or something like that. That wasn't really included in the chart that you showed. And those are our two nearest neighbors that we're always in competition with, it seems. And
the information that was shown in the chart during the budget presentation with the reason why Upper Makefield was excluded is because they don't collect an EIT.
Well, regardless, you mentioned the chart was supposed to show how we are still very low, and we are, and we will be, one of the lower ones. But it should include those two municipalities that we seem to be in competition with, and because they're trying to push on Newtown a lot of these things like overdevelopment that people don't like in Newtown. So I'm just saying, if we can have a discussion about how to spend this money, maybe how to give back to the community some increase in services beyond just the police for the rate increase that we're doing. I mean, I've often mentioned the Public Works Department, and I've often been told how understaffed they are. And I know we've been doing more road repaving than we've done, maybe 5 years ago, but we're still averaging 3.7 miles per year, which just keeps us where we're at in terms of the number of roads that are, still in disrepair. And for example, I think there are ways to increase that to 5 miles per year. And I'd like to see something like that in the budget so that people know that they are getting the one thing that they've asked for in the survey. We've done this survey, and the number one thing that people felt need improving in Newtown was the maintenance of our roads. And we're not giving them that. So, that's my feeling, and I hope we can come to some new agreement about how to spend this money. And, whether it's 7.99 mils increase or 6 or whatever, I'd like to just see something more that we give to the township that they want, and not just what some of the departments here want. So that's my feeling.
Well, I will say that the manager presented the budget. It's now in the board's hands, so any suggestions that you'd like to make, I will certainly incorporate them.
Well, I have one specific suggestion. In terms of the roads, you suggested that we put, end that 1 mil dedicated tax that was going to get a loan so that in 1 year we can pave 5 miles, and then we'd have to wait until the 3rd year before we do that again. So in the average, the first year we would pay 5 miles, the second year it'd be 2.9, under 3 for the 3rd year, so you got 6 and 11 divided by 3 is still only 3.67 miles per year. I would like to see 5 miles per year, and the way I thought of doing that is if you're going to raise the millage, let's have a dedicated 2 mills for road repairs and take that 1 mil out of the 7.5 or whatever it is and dedicate that and we'll have enough money to do 5 miles of roads each year. So that's just one suggestion I have. Thank you.
Is there an answer to that question? No? Kyle, do you have?
Yeah, I do have, I do want to agree with you, Mr. Chairman. I don't think 0 is an option here. And I also agree with what you said, that we should have been doing it in little increments, including over the last several years. The numbers I'm trying to cobble together from the presentation is looking like almost 140% tax increase. I'm thinking we should be closer to 40% increase rather than that number. But it's hard finding things in the budget here that we could possibly yank out. So I have some questions of clarification I'd like to ask Mr. Micah, if I may. Some of them are just for clarification, just because I'm curious, but I'll go with my list here. And the technology spending portion of the presentation letter, we mentioned 15,000 for computer upgrades.
Yes.
How many computers are we looking at there? Are they desktops and servers, or what's the breakdown?
It's for desktops and for new laptops for the police vehicles.
Okay, and do you have any guesstimate on how many units?
It's eight personal desk computers and 4 laptops.
Okay. All right, and also I was looking at the capital purchases. It looks like they're going from 19,500 to 34,500. I think it's on the same page of your presentation. And I was trying to. It seems like a significant increase. Is that mainly due from the computers or something else that I wasn't sure is going on there?
So which category was it again?
It was technology.
Okay.
Yeah. There's no page number.
It's Schedule E lays out the capital plan.
Okay. Yeah, I was looking at the first part of your letter. All right.
Okay.
Well, so it's in the Schedule E, you're telling me?
Yeah.
Why we're going from 19.5 to 34?
Yes.
All right. I can look at that later.
Because there's 2 upgrades. There's an admin server that needs to be replaced in this building, and the AMS server that recently crashed needs to be replaced. It's 16 years old.
Okay.
There's also $7,500 allocated to the AV booth up there, so the video equipment continues to work.
Okay. Now, regarding public works capital expenditures, we have a truck, an F-350, for a total of $31K in 2021. So I'm guessing it's being financed. I believe you mentioned that already. How many years out are we looking at for that?
The international dump truck and the F-350 will be financed over 3 years,
Okay.
similar to what we recently approved tonight.
So that's going to lock us in for 2 more years' budgets increases then?
Correct.
All right. Just wanted to clarify that. Okay, also, thinking in public works, the presentation says 58K, but page 21 shows 219,000, which is about 40,000 more than the last 2 years. And I couldn't figure out why that went up so much.
Which page? I'm sorry.
Page 21. It doesn't jive with the presentation portion of your presentation. When you have the
So,
I don't know what you want to call it. Yep. So yeah, capital purchase of public works. 29 budget was 141, 180 actual. I'm sorry, yeah, 180 actual. And now we're looking to go into 219. It just seems like a pretty big jump, and I was trying to determine what that jump was from, why we're going up that much.
that includes all of the loan payments.
Okay, so it's back to the vehicles.
Right.
Got ya. All right. Now, also you mentioned the fire hydrant maintenance costs going up because of the water company.
Yeah.
I mean, do we run the water that much that's going to make an impact? I mean,
No, it's not that we're running the water, it's just their fee for the to maintain those hydrants.
They maintain them altogether, right?
Yes, their fees increased for the general maintenance overall.
Okay. All right. right, and going further down my notes, legislative body, page 4, there's an item for subscriptions and memberships for like $4,500. I was curious what that was. What that was for.
That is for PSATS memberships, the subscriptions that you guys, for the magazines, you get the project manager magazines and stuff like that.
Township News.
Okay. Got ya. All right, and also looking at page 4 in the executive section, our payment increase is going from about 118 to 185K. It's a 56% increase. That seemed kind of high. Not looking for a comment necessarily on that, just something I noticed. 118 2020 budget to 185. That seems like a pretty big jump.
That includes the salary for the assistant manager.
Got ya. All right. Okay, also on page 4, there was financial administration. Professional services line was 2019 actual was 21,000, and here year to date we're already at 91,000. Trying to figure out what that was from.
That is for the payment for the ESI study.
Gotcha. So it was worked into that.
Yeah, it was,
Okay.
it was under the
Yeah, that makes
professional
sense. I couldn't
service.
figure out why it was such a big jump. But
Yeah.
that makes sense. Yeah, it's lower for actual budget next year. I just noticed that jump.
Mhm.
Let me see. Oh, also, so codes and zoning, I'm trying to find the page number. I thought I wrote it down. Page 8, I think. Oh, no, here's a general. So you mentioned hiring code enforcement officer in the middle of the year onward, which is like 40K salary plus benefits and all that entails. But on page 8 in the budget item, we're still budgeting for the same amount of professional services at $157,000.
Yeah.
And I just thought, why did you expect it to be about the same?
That 157 is for the building code official.
So it's not the codes and zoning guy?
No, they're two. One is for Remington Vernick to do the building inspections and the actual structural analysis of how these businesses and houses are built. The under management salaries at 40,000. That's half the year of $80,000 salary for the director of zoning and code enforcement.
Okay. All right, moving on to page 9. Planning Commission professional services was jumping all over the place. It was the 17K range, and it went to 21, and we have a budget for 42,000. Why is that bouncing around so high from what's budgeted to actuals?
That's
for Planning Commission.
Because it's sort of dependent on what applications come in and how the amount of time that the consultants have to spend on Planning Commission services. So if we have a bunch of applications come in a calendar year for, applications for land development, it takes a longer time to spend for the consultant to be paid to be here and to be doing those reviews.
Okay.
That figure of 42.5 also includes the payment for Bucks County Planning Commission to redo the
comprehensive plan.
Comprehensive plan.
Okay,
Thank
so
you.
that was out of normal fee. I got you.
Yes.
So in looking at zoning hearing board, the same kind of question. I'm guessing it's probably the same answer.
Yep.
All right. Also, another point of clarification for me. So the park and rec expenditures were the trail extensions. The presentation mentions 922,000. Page 23 says 550,000.
Right, because that's the 922 minus the grant contribution.
So that's what I was getting at.
Correct.
Okay, gotcha. And what was the ratio of that again? Was it 1-to-1? Were they matching or something?
It was 50%.
Okay. All right. And also on page 11 for Park and Rec, the summer camp budget's going up about 15,000 for 2020. Looks like, let me get the page up.
Summer camp expense?
Yeah, it just seems like it's a pretty big jump, 15K. Like, what's the plan?
Well, the 2019 budgeted amount was 75,000. 2020 was 70. 2021 is 70.
No.
Next one down.
Next one down?
Yeah, go down, summer camp expense.
Oh, the expenses.
1.451.38.
Well, it's like anything else. The expenses for these services rise over time.
All right, this seems like a pretty big jump. That was all that white stuck out to me. That's all I had question-wise. And I think Mr. Mack brought this up. Our fund balance for 2021, it looks like we're padding it up again. Is that the intent? I think it projected that net fund balance for 21 is $2 million.
Yeah, it's roughly $2,058,408, which is roughly almost 15% of the total expenditures. So,
which is about
it's
almost 200,000 more than projected for this year.
Yeah, so it's in between the 10% that the township has in resolution not to drop below that 10%, and the GFOA recommendation of 17.
Okay. All right. That's all the questions I have. Thank you.
Mr. Davis got a lot of mine, like 3 or 4 of them. So, let me start off by suggesting this: that I would like the Finance Committee to be able to get a copy of the budget. If it's all agreeable to the board, I'd like them to be able to get access to it maybe tomorrow or this evening, but tomorrow is good. And then I don't know if that needs a resolution or just a consensus.
Mr. Sander, was that need an official motion or just a consensus of the board?
For what?
To pass the budget, the manager's budget to the Finance Committee.
That just needs direction. I mean, if you want to make a motion, it would be more formal. Mr. Lewis would have his direction clearly. Maybe that's the way to go. But this is not, you're not adopting a preliminary budget yet, which would obviously require a motion.
We would be looking.
I would give direction to Mr. Lewis by motion. I think that would be appropriate.
How does the board feel about giving the budget to the Finance Committee? Kyle?
Fine with me.
Dennis?
It's my motion.
David? That's fine. Okay, consensus?
Okay. One of the recommendations that the Finance Committee has had was to include a line item for economic development. This past year, it wasn't an economic development grant, but it was the DCED grant that we got that ultimately was awarded to ESI. That was in the budget. I think it was put in the budget. I'm trying to give you a page number. Page 4, under financial administration, professional services. It was kind of put together because I asked Mr. Lewis already. There's the auditor's expense there, but we also put in like $80,000 to fund the grant, and then we also had an offset on page 1, I believe. An offset. Let me see. Page 3. That showed the state grant coming in, their portion of that. So we had $80,000 for what we paid out to ESI, or it was actually $37,500 twice with the matching grant. So anyway, what I'm saying, what I'd like to do, crux of the matter is, I'd like to have a line item for economic development, and it's not unprecedented. And one option for doing that would be to have access to a grant if the board so desired to pursue a Phase 2 grant for economic development. And that is offered by the DCED. So I know we're supposed to be taking things off this budget, but that is one thing that I'd like to add in.
Dennis, do you know what amount that could be?
Yeah, it would be 80, well, the Finance Committee made a recommendation to us for $125,000.
That's to
for that light
cover, like some consultants to come in, or?
It would be for another grant, possibly a consultant that would be, that would follow that grant, if it's anticipating that the Phase 2 grant would say we need someone dedicated to do economic development. So there would be the grant cost, there would be the consultant costs that follow along, and that may even flow into next year. The consultant does the grant, but then follow along after that to implement the steps in the grant.
When will we know if we needed a second grant? We haven't even implemented the first grant. That's part of this budget, correct?
That's part of the
So we haven't even gone into actually know if this is going to be viable. And when we're already planning for a second grant?
Maybe by the end of by the end of 2021. Did we budget for a possible second?
No.
No, that's why, that's what we're asking for here. Or that's what the finance.
A follow-up, the implementation phase from e-console, not
yes,
down.
but focused on economic development.
So-
ESI looked at our budgeting process.
But do you know anything about grants for that? What are available? How much the grant is?
Yes.
What grants are available?
DCED has a document that, I don't have it with me here tonight, that I think, but
I mean,
they do have a process. They actually have a Phase 3 grant.
the last time we did this, we knew with the ESI, we knew a number. We knew what it was going to be about 70,000.
Right,
So
and I looked through the DCED document for a number. They did not offer a number for that, and I never got a chance to call them and find out what a
Well, it just seems
number is.
125,000 seems an awful lot because you're looking at a matching grant of another 125,000.
Well, yeah. I couldn't talk the Finance Committee into a lower number. I tried. They started with a higher number than that. So my hope is to get a line item that's dedicated to economic development, because that will, I mean, it's spending some money now that will help bring in some businesses and bring in some, maybe we get KVK Tech building to get filled up.
Well, you can't, I don't, again, I understand the reasoning, but I'll go back to that word. We're putting hope, not a guarantee. We're putting hope into the budget. Mr. Oxley speaks about trying to drive more business to this township.
Right.
That's also a hope. It's not a guarantee. And to, again, spend an extra $125,000 on a hope, I don't know. It's not a guarantee that something will happen. We're still waiting for the guarantee of KVK to fill up that building. I mean, so I'd rather see more solids than a guarantee. And again, what I'll say is Mr. Oxley picks up a phone and calls a business or a technology company from Doylestown or New Jersey to relocate into Pennsylvania. I don't even think it costs them the cost of a phone call, because that's all free now anyway. It's so I mean,
but it's difficult for someone who has a daytime job.
It's a phone call.
Well,
then it's a phone call.
Mr. Chairman, I would say that, there may be some times where there may be some potential resources that may need to be utilized. Not saying that what we do on the Economic Development Committee isn't fruitful so far, but, if there's something that we may need that may come up, there may be something that our partners from Finance Committee that will assist in certain things that we might not be able to commit to just because of maybe time constraints. There may be times where that stuff is necessary. And also, I would say that it provides us with a little bit more, not to say that we're not serious, but it just shows in the budget that we were really committed to doing that, because I think if we flourish from an economic development perspective, our millage potential increases down the road that some people are concerned about, we'll see that we're trying to circumvent that in a different way. I know people love roads and they want smooth roads and things like that, but our primary focus as a board is to make sure that we keep our township, on the forefront of being one of the places that people are destined to want to work and also live. And I think that, roads are great for that. I get that part. But I think if we don't have enough revenue coming in, and then I think also part of the revenue coming in from the economic development piece is we get larger, or we have all these homes that are going to be potentially here, right? So we want to make sure we're filling those homes with folks that, are also going to pay those taxes, right? And we have good earned income tax from those businesses that will be here, and those people probably live here and work here potentially. Or folks like you talk about from Jersey that might come over, and we get those revenues from that. And I think an economic development piece of that is just basically having a little bit of, I don't know if it has to be $125,000. I know that's what the Finance Committee has recommended. I think that we should think about it, consider it, and sleep on it, and then get back. And just know that that's something serious. There's lots of things in there.
So you're not serious unless there's a dollar amount?
No, I'm not saying that. I'm 100% all in.
And the people that are going to purchase these homes that we're talking about, whatever, maybe Toll Brothers Arcadia, unless they know there's economic development, those people are going to be paupers moving into those homes.
No, I'm not saying that either.
See, I don't know.
I understand what you're saying.
Again, we've had a gentleman say to us, cut money, cut expenses, and here we are creating expenses.
Well, maybe we don't have to add it in. Maybe we find a way to, replace it from another line item in the budget, perhaps.
So basically, it's $102,000 like it was before, with the state. Then we fund the state giving us, $40,000 of that. So it really is the audit committee. The audit payment was already in there. So it's basically $40,000.
So you're going from $125,000 to $40,000.
I'm judging from this conversation here, yes. So and I was never. I was the one that was trying to talk him down lower than 125. Before.
Listen, maybe I'm just a cheapskate, but I look at the budget conservatively as if I was spending my own money. And I would want to know, talking to potential businesses, that they had the intention to come here. And then, you know what? I'd find the money. Now we're going to have money sitting there again with the hope that if we're serious about finding business come to Newtown, it shouldn't be a dollar sign attached to it. We should be doing it because that's what we want to do.
And maybe we don't want to have a phase 2 grant, and then so we wouldn't spend that money. We haven't decided yet. I know the committee wants to have that possibility.
Well,
the Finance Committee could have done what ESI did. It would have just taken them 3 years.
Or maybe not.
I doubt.
I think right now the budget is pretty tight, right?
Yeah.
I don't know where we find that money unless there are cuts from somewhere else, and that's I think you need to be looking for if you want to do something like that.
Well,
and that's what
let's ask the budget.
Right.
And I appreciate it.
Well, it's what I suggested.
Kyle's list was right on. You picked out the things that flipped up, but most of them were $10,000 or less.
Right.
Well, here, I'll throw something out. going back to what Mr. Mack said in regards to the police officers. Now, I think one is not enough. Maybe three may be too much for this time period. If we were to hire two, and I think we collect our EIT tax mid-year, which would give us more of an influx of revenue. And if we were to hire that third officer midway, we'd be saving 50% of an income until he was hired.
The way I have it laid out for next year would be one officer in March, and then the two other officers wouldn't be hired until the second half of the year because we wouldn't realize the real estate tax revenue until the end of May and early June.
And that's baked into the numbers.
Yes.
Yeah.
So if you look under Schedule C,
Yep.
you'll see under the police portion there,
Yep.
you'll see the new hire as of 11/1/20. That's the replacement for Lieutenant Matthews, and then you have new hires of 3/1 and then 2 of 7/1 as of 7/1. So those numbers are significantly less than their actual starting salaries. Essentially half.
And have you factored in also, Mr. Lissafai, potentially what revenues, if we get an agreement from the borough, are those factored in there as well?
Those are not, because we don't have a physical agreement.
Right. Sorry, that's the theme of the evening, the word hope.
So that could be, hopefully, they could improve the bottom line.
Well, I think, again, Mr. Mack hit it on the head when he said, how long have we been waiting for this already? It's like,
Well, we've been knocked over the head with it now, so. So, I guess the question is, do we want to add this line item? We probably don't have to decide tonight. We have.
Well, do we have it anywhere to add? Micah, can it be added from any?
There has been the line item that we used this past year. It's professional services under financial administration.
Right. That's where the grant money expenditure was shown.
But is that money gone? You know what I'm saying? Did we use it do we have another $40,000 that was allocated? I thought we allocated.
We allocated 40, right, in last year's budget, we allocated 40, and we had 40 from the state. So we showed $40,000 in revenue on the revenue side.
Grant.
And we showed $80,000 on the expenditure side.
So are we still carrying that 40,000?
No.
No?
Why don't we talk about it and come back to each other with some ideas on it for the following meeting?
Well, that's what we're going to be doing this every meeting.
Well.
Oh, the next meeting is we hang it, right? Or
if that's the
present
pleasure of the board, yes.
If that's agreeable. Yeah.
Right. We may delay that.
So, I mean, we want Micah to make whatever adjustments can be made now for the next time we see the budget.
Yeah. I'm in favor of doing that.
And again, how? Well, where are you getting it from? I just want to know where you're getting it from.
Well, it would reduce the net fund balance by 40,000.
See, well, I mean, 40,000 is a nominal price, but I'm not a proponent of taking money from the general fund to put into another line item. We're again robbing Peter to pay Paul, so to speak.
But, I mean, life changes too. And, if we're in a period that we need to do economic development because we have a lot of buildings that are empty.
Well, and this COVID could go on for another year.
That's true.
And it could cause a financial drain on the township in that way too.
It would be,
And if that happens, we probably wouldn't be pursuing a consultant to do it.
And then also you have to think about it as an investment for some potential financial impact, economic impact down the road that would be essential for our township. So I think that when you look at it from that perspective, you have to at least consider it in a way of something to be beneficial for us that will, reduce potential millage increases years down the road. And that's something that we obviously have heard tonight that we want to try to avoid, right? So I think it's important that we at least have that as consideration. And to Mr. Fisher's point, and to your point, Mr. Chairman, if COVID lasts for another year, I mean, we're not spending that. We're not spending those dollars. I mean, if we knew what was going to happen, we wouldn't have spent the money on ESI either, correct? Earlier this year. So now the idea now is just that we would be very, very conservative on those dollars, I think, in terms of if we actually truly spent them. And that's something that we can all make sure we put a line item in, we put a target on to make sure that we seriously consider, do we really, really need to spend that money? Yeah. But it's just there.
Well, see, again, that's where I'm going to go back to knowing that we're going to do something. Having the money doesn't mean we know we're going to do something.
Right.
Doing it, what's Nike's just do it? That's where getting the money is more important. I'm looking at it from, we're going to be asking residents for a tax increase and then also spending another $125,000. Now, when the time comes,
It doesn't need to be 125.
Let's make a conservative number on that. So, like I said before, I don't think, and to Mr. Fisher, I think he's also saying that it doesn't have to be $125,000. But I think it shows. I mean, we have to invest in ourselves one way or another, right? All the line items are more or less to keep us up and running, right? And on all the different programs and all the different administration costs and so forth, and also investing in potentially more employees just for services. This would be a line item to invest in our township so that we have an economic impact. Now, I understand your point, Mr. Chairman. We can pick up a phone. I can make calls. I've been doing that. Definitely, my committee has been helping. Our finance committee has been working effortlessly to get us to a point where we are here now. And I think it's important that we at least consider that as an investment for our future as a township.
I hear,
I think that's what it is. I mean, think about, you're investing in a township for the future. And you said it earlier. You said, I look at this budget like I'm spending my own money. So, okay, think about it from this perspective. You might be a little strapped, but you're not telling little Johnny that he or she, Johnny or Sally, or for my case, I'll say I'm not going to tell my kids that they couldn't, I'm not going to invest in them for their future. I mean, think about it. This is our baby. Newtown is our baby. We love Newtown. We live here. And I think that if we love it and we cherish it, and frankly, it's been aware that we haven't done everything we needed to do in the past to make sure that we flourish the way we should or want to, or compete, as others have been saying on this board, compete with other townships, yada, yada, blah, blah, blah. And I think it's very important that we look at it from a long-term planning perspective. And I understand that we're very tight and we're conservative. Doesn't mean we have to spend the money, but we have to look at it from a long-term future perspective. And sometimes you got to plant a seed to let it grow. And
I get all these cliches, and they're
hey,
amazing.
Call me cliche or not. I just think it's important.
Mr. Lewis, the supposed assistant manager, what's that salary going to be?
I have it in there as $80,000.
And would you assume that this person would work on economic development?
Yes.
So we're paying $80,000.
Sorry, I'm sorry, it was $90,000.
$90,000 to a person that's going to be full-time in your office hopefully prospecting.
Well, it would be a function, it would be, I would view that as something that he and I would probably split.
Right, which right now you can't do by yourself,
Yeah.
but with an assistant at $90,000, which is double the amount, more than double the amount of the proposed $40,000, working full-time to promote the township.
Right.
Not saying we can't help along with this, but we're going to have, we're budgeted in the budget to hire this person to be doing this for us. So we are planning, in essence, for economic development through a township employee.
If that's what.
Mr. Lewis, in the past when we had you were the assistant township manager here before, correct?
Mm-hmm.
Did you work on economic development?
Not at that time, no. 'Cause
Did the
it was,
township manager at the time work on economic development?
yes.
Okay. And how long ago was that?
2015.
Got it. And what year are we in?
2020.
And do we have an economic development?
We could be
Well,
doing better on
that's not
economic
fair.
development. We've got a lot to sell.
At the time.
Well, no, I'm not, and I love Mr. Lewis. I'm not saying anything against him. I'm just asking a question.
I'm not asking you to marry him. I'm just saying that it's not fair because at that time, he was Mr. Lewis and a full-time township manager who also worked as the finance director. Now, in this reversal, we're saying that hopefully the assistant manager I'm sure we're going to, Mr. Lewis will look at the person's qualifications, will have some sort of economic development within his or her qualifications. At that time, Mr. Ferguson was the person with the qualification. Mr. Lewis was his assistant. Now, since Mr. Ferguson has left, Mr. Lewis has been all by himself. Now, I know he's a big boy, he can handle himself, but he's also been doing a lot of other duties.
Absolutely.
So,
At least 3.
what I'm saying is if we're going to hire and have budgeted for this assistant, then we're going to have a economic development person basically on our payroll.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I appreciate that.
Anytime.
So, and we're still going to do a zone, we're
Or
still
should
going to hire a
I'll
zoning
use a
officer.
cliche, my pleasure.
What's that?
I'll use a cliche, my pleasure.
So can I get the process?
You're too kind.
Can I get the process straight here? The preliminary budget is not the final budget. So, for example, I made a recommendation about the roads, but we haven't decided to put that in, so we can still think about that. And you can have a preliminary, next time we discuss this on November 10th, we can discuss really specific. We come up with some ideas here.
I thought that's why we had to do it tonight.
Do we have to do it tonight?
I thought that was.
What's the reason of having a preliminary budget that the residents
that's what I
can
heard.
see if they can't make changes in it?
Well, let me say this. If you want to make changes to the manager's budget tonight, you can certainly do so. You can also make a motion to approve the 2021, the preliminary 2021 budget next time contingent upon changes that you want to make.
Okay.
So you would direct me to make those changes in the budget. I would make the changes before I actually would advertise
So,
it and put
in
it
other
out.
words, we still have some time amongst ourselves to think about these things. I
Right,
know
but once-
Basically, 2
Mr.
weeks.
Davis made suggestions for cutting things in certain places.
I'm going to go a step further, if I could. As I said, I think 140% is too high. I'd like to make a motion to instruct the manager to come back with another proposed budget at, say, 40% tax increase instead of the 140%.
Well, it's 178%, I thought.
Well, it depends on how you flux the numbers. Let's go with that then.
But in any case, I think that's kind of draconian without, he's put in a lot of work here, a lot of thought, followed recommendations from consultants, which we paid good money for. I don't see how cutting it to 40% is going to throw out everything.
Mr. Mack, Mr. Davis made a motion.
Did he make a motion?
Yes. He made a motion to authorize the manager to go back and produce a budget that has a 40%, no more than a 40% tax increase?
Correct.
Is a motion necessary? I mean, you could be directed to do whatever to the budget, correct? You don't need a motion and approval.
Well, it's a considerable amount of work, and I think if it's going to happen, you can't waste his time with just me saying it.
Well, it needs a second, Mr. Calabro, before we...
I'll second it.
Okay,
Just for sake of
then
discussion.
by all means, discuss.
My question is, again, look into the future. Next year, will we have to raise taxes again? You know, I mean, I'm just looking at, are we just holding off on the inevitable by making the deduction and then finding out, well, that wasn't enough? And then next year having to come back and having this discussion? Or is the tax increase being proposed going to cover us for, I know there's no predictability, but could it cover us for a couple of years?
And yes, and that was sort of the intent of the development of this budget is hopefully COVID goes away, and we certainly don't want to have to do what we did this year. So in the event that COVID doesn't go away and for some reason gets worse and the EIT numbers take another major hit, that we will have hopefully other income, other sources of revenue to sustain the operation through 2023.
But our EIT numbers have not taken a hit.
They did a significant hit back in March, April, May.
But we're ending the year actually ahead.
The year-end projection is 5,030,000, or yes, a little bit ahead of where we had budgeted.
For 2019,
Right.
even with COVID. So
That's correct.
even with COVID going forward, I'm not anticipating you're going to lose EIT. It's going to follow the same pattern. I mean,
Nobody
the
can
best
predict
way
that.
to predict the future is to see what happened in the past. So
Some other things happened. The rec department couldn't have summer camp, and some revenue was missed
well, that's
there.
a completely different issue.
It happened because of COVID.
I think that summer camps, we're not really making money, we're offsetting the cost. We still have expenditure associated with it.
Department kind of pays for itself. Going back to the motion that's on the floor, we've already had the hypothetical about a zero tax increase that Chairman Calabro suggested. Do we want to put you through all that? I don't know.
Well, I don't.
My fear is that we'll be doing this again next year and the next year after that if we don't.
Well, that's I'm afraid of that also. And it goes back to, what was discussed earlier is if we had raised them small increments over, say, even going back the last 10 years, we wouldn't be probably in this situation right now. But do we want to drop it that drastically and risk that next year we may have to increase it another 40%? You know what I'm saying? I mean, I have no problem seeing a budget with that adjustment in it. Is it a hard task to do? You're just changing some numbers in the on the balance sheet.
What exactly is? I guess I need some clarification of what exactly the direction is.
I guess lowering the tax base. Is that it, Kyle?
Yeah, that was what I was.
Lowering the real estate tax revenue to 40% of what is currently budgeted.
It's like 2 mils. I think that's the number.
No, I understood it as it's currently at a certain percentage.
It's the total revenue for the current millage dedicated to the general fund for real estate taxes is $2,950,896. Are we looking at
what's the
adjusting
direction?
that
What's the
number to
direction?
40%?
So, judging by the numbers that were in your presentation, I tried to come up with the percentage of the increase. Mr. Mack and I disagree a little bit on it. I could be wrong.
140, 170.
Whatever, it's 140 or 170 or somewhere thereabouts. I'm saying make that increase, a 40% tax increase, property taxes.
Okay, but I need to understand exactly what those numbers are based on to be able to do.
Well, you
The
take
total millage increase in this budget.
You take 4.5, you multiply it by 0.4 to get a 40% increase. What's that?
So I'm saying, raise it 40% of the current rate.
So that's about...
Right, that's not a 40%
So that's
discount off of what's proposed.
Right, right.
That's only have a 40% tax increase over last year. I
That's
just want to
about,
make sure Mike understands the
That's about an
direction.
additional 2 mils
right.
Right. In my estimation.
instead of 7.99.
Right.
So we're looking at roughly 6.8. We're at 4.9 now, correct?
4.5.
4.5? I thought it was 4.9. Okay, then it'd be lower than that. 4.5,
Is there any magic to the 40%?
6.3.
Can we make it a little easier if it was
So-
50%?
I also do want to say that you got to keep in mind that also there is the adjustment to the millages of the dedicated funds, which may equate to that 40% once you do the math. So
I'm saying of the total amount. How you break it down, I'm not concerned with necessarily. It's the amount of the increase, total increase.
okay, because you may be left with a number sort of similar to zero in the general fund because of the millage increases associated with the dedicated fund, the hydrant tax, the fire tax, and
Well, then you
Well,
also...
you don't have to do it right now either. I mean, if you want to get back to us tomorrow, figuring all that out.
Well, it seems to me a 2 mil increase is not going to pay for the help that he needs.
Exactly.
Hire new police.
it's not.
There goes our assistant manager working on...
I mean, basically, he would have to cut out every...
Line item back in.
He would have to cut out every new personnel and every new salary increase, except for the 3% that's from the unions negotiating. You can't change that.
So is it worth the enterprise to crunch all those numbers again to let us know that there's still going to be some big holes?
I think it's important to just at least look at it so we can actually compare it, because we need to say, hey, we at least looked at it.
Yeah, okay.
I think that's important. I do think that it would be literally kicking the can, honestly, and if we don't have any extra influx of revenue somewhere else, we're going to be, like you've all talked about, we'll be talking about this again following year. But it's important so we actually look at all options based upon the manager's recommendation at that millage or somewhere along those lines, maybe, I don't know, maybe 40 or 50, whatever it is that would be something comparable. But, we have to look at it from a perspective of, hey, this is unpopular, but there's also an opportunity that we can figure out ways to recognize it's unpopular and find other alternatives, options
We should have an
for the
option.
future.
Maybe take and this is just throwing this out there, take the difference from the proposed general fund. We as a board can knock it down to whatever percentage we want. We don't have to hold at 10%, 15%. We could go down, I've heard some board members say, we could go down to 0.
You talking about the reserve fund?
Yes. So I would like in this proposed budget to take whatever the difference is out of the general fund to see where that would deplete our general fund too, if this were to happen.
That would be the logical conclusion of it, right?
Okay?
So I'm taking 40%. All right, so
Increase it 40% of the current rates, real estate millage.
So increasing 40% of the current real estate millage.
Which is approximately 2 mils.
Right. So .865 is already in the dedicated funds. So there's
Of the two that we're saying.
So there's already essentially one of those 2 mills already dedicated. So you're essentially increasing the contribution to the general fund by $350,000, a little over.
I'm asking for direction from you. I'm not sure what that's going to come out to. And you'd be able to prioritize what you'd want to.
Why don't you just say, let's instead of 7.5 to the general fund, you want to do 2 mil. We're not talking about dedicated funds. We're just talking about the 7.5 mil that we're going to be added to the general fund. You want to make it 2.
It would be up to Mike on how that breaks down in which fund. I'm not going to direct that part. My motion
I'm
wasn't
just
direct
trying
that
to
part.
make it easier to
But
understand.
I think to keep everything the same with the lesser millage on taxes, money has to come out of the general fund.
Yes.
If you want that assistant manager, if you want that police officer, it's got to come from somewhere. So, and this is a test. I'm assuming this is a test. We're testing.
Well, I'd like to not have to raise taxes that much.
Okay, but we're going to have to deplete something. The only thing we can deplete is the general fund. And it might go down to 500,000.
Well, you may not be able to hire new personnel also.
But let's see what it would be if we kept it that way. Comparing apples to apples. If we start deducting people out, then we're creating a whole new budget. All we're doing now is shifting the millage and taking the money out of the general fund. It's another sample of the budget, that's all, for us to take.
No, I'm saying, what cuts would the manager make to make that number? That's what I'm looking at. I'm not looking at how much we're going to deplete our fund. That wasn't my motion.
You're talking about a difference of about 5.5 mil, which works out to how much money?
15.
Got you calculate? That's not enough.
1.6 million maybe, or something like that.
Is that what you got?
Clearly, cuts would have to get made. I wasn't suggesting running down the fund.
I'm just
Well, I'm not
putting out
saying,
a number.
I'm not saying you said that, but I'm just saying.
Then the reserve would be reduced to
0.
Well, there's
Zero.
a motion. There's a motion. You want to instruct them to do it or not? I guess we can hash out any other details all night.
Well, you just put out a number here. I'm
Yeah.
trying to work with the number. Is that what we're trying to decide on, or is it a different number you want to try?
No, I went the number I made.
Okay.
You want to hold it at 10% or?
I want to hold to, if I raise taxes 40%, what do we have to cut to meet that number?
But what do we keep the reserve at?
That's up to the budget. I'm not instructing what to reserve in the budget. Reserves.
But we're saying don't deplete the general fund.
If Micah comes back with a budget that says it's down to 0 and there's no cuts made, then that's the budget he gave us. That's not what I was looking for, but I'm leaving it up to the manager's discretion. Was my motion. The point of my motion was that.
Okay. We have a motion, we have a second. Any further discussion? Anything from the public? Yes, sir, I know you're waiting. Yep.
I'm George Sladani, 33 Meridian Circle. I'm speaking as an individual citizen. I think this is an abrogation of the fiscal responsibility. If the only thing you're concerned about is a percentage increase and you're afraid of that number, look at the absolute number of dollars that are raised. The school board raises their taxes by a couple of percent. It's $300 to $400.
8%.
8% or whatever.
4.5.
If the township raises its taxes by $350, it's 180%, right? Something approximate that. On a percentage basis, it looks ridiculous. But on an actual dollar basis, for what's needed, it's comparable. It just seems to me that there's a fear of doing what's right fiscally for the township, both in the short term and the long term, by just playing with percentages.
Well, I totally agree. The percentage to the dollar, it's always scarier to say percentage, and when the dollar amount it could be nominal. But we have some direction here. Well, let me, anyone else? John, you have anything to say?
Yeah, just some basics. Whenever you do a budget, I've been involved in budgets. Want to work for the government, and I was a union guy. And whenever you do a budget, you have your wants. Not usually a necessity; it's a want. So you might ask for 5 new computers or 5 new people, and really you need 2. It would be great if you had 3. So you ask for 5, you might get that 3, and if they really want to cut back, you'll get the 2 that you actually need. You got to have. And somebody talked about surveys over there. Surveys are, it all depends who answers them. Usually a small percentage. And a lot of people said the roads. Well, first of all, I don't know if everybody was from the township that won that survey. And roads. It's not nice to say that stuff, but most people don't know what's a state road and what's township road. And you look around here, the roads that are really bad are the state roads. Why? They are. I used to drive a bus for a local thing, and the state roads were always the worst thing. And, when they fix them nice and everything, but, township roads, there's not really that many. I've been, not often, but I've probably been through every development in Newtown all the years I've been up here, and they're not that bad. A lot of them get to do with patching, which the state does a lot now. They patch the road. They don't do the whole road. And, that's as far as roads go. One last thing, the gentleman who was up here earlier, the guy with the white hair, he was at the Meet Mac Monday. And I'm just wondering if that dialogue was rehearsed. Thank you.
Thank you, John. You're a comedian. All right. Okay. Well, we have a motion and a second.
Can I say something, Mr. Chairman? I have understanding of why we're looking at this and fine-tooth combing it and so forth to make sure that it is the right thing for our township. I totally get that. But even if we do this, and he goes through all of that, and we come out with we come out with the same end result, what does that do? It just makes us a little delayed more to just do what we're going to do anyway, right? Which is basically potentially raise taxes. Now, I think we need to make sure that we're all on the same page here with this. It's important to do, but we don't want to, like I said before, delay the inevitable, which is potentially have to talk about this the following year. And if we're being conservative and all this other stuff, I think if it's going to be lower, you have to find a way to provide the township with more revenue somewhere else. So I go back to my whole argument about economic development, and I think that should be something that's seriously considered. Because if we don't raise taxes, or we raise them to a point where we'll have to raise them again, we have no other way of generating revenue unless we do some economic development. And that's just something I want the board to consider. When we go home and you think about this long term, what makes sense for us long term? Because we're going to put potentially the township manager through, I don't know how long did the budget take you to do the first time?
4 months.
He's got a prototype.
Is that prototype going to work to just, as Mr. McCarron said earlier, models, right? Can you plug numbers in and with a model and get that turned around within a time frame, or is that going to be
No, it'll be problematic. I mean, to try to maintain a 10% fund balance, everything's going to have to change.
Okay.
Well, I don't think you have to maintain that 10% fund balance. I think we want to know give us the bad news and give us the good news. And I know Kyle has been through a few of these budgets. I've been through a few of these budgets. And I remember some managers being told, give me a budget with a tax increase, without a tax increase, with a small tax increase. and I don't want to make work any more for you, but I think as a board, we have to be sure what we're voting on. And we have to be sure, because, David, you're right. We are affecting the people of this township. And we want to do what we feel is right. And I mean, tonight, I'm not ready to vote on this budget, and I don't know if in 2 weeks I'll be ready to vote on this budget. But maybe I'd like to see another alternative to it. And heck, you know, Micah may come up with something that's miraculous, and if he wasn't directed to make a few changes, he would have never done that. So.
Fair enough.
I'm just don't want this to be a futile process. I mean, if we learn something from it, if the public learns something from the fact that it really is draconian to go with a 40%, then there might be some value in it.
But the 40%, Mr. Fisher, will essentially still take us to zero, you said, correct?
That's correct.
Yeah.
So, I mean.
But that would be with everything in it that's in it now.
Yep.
I think the
Yeah,
other thing you have to take.
I'm looking for cuts, not for.
I think Kyle's also looking for
spending cuts.
What do you got? What has to be taken out?
So trim the fat, essentially.
And right now it's going to be all personnel.
Yeah. When I asked, what are we getting for this real estate tax implementation for the general fund? When I asked that, what do we get for it? I mean, we're getting an assistant manager, 3 police officers, a fund balance that goes up above 10, a good bond rating behind that, and probably several small improvements or increases in the budget or capital spending. So if that all goes away, then it'll slap us in the face.
But we don't have to approve.
Right.
But what I'm saying is, let's see it.
Yeah.
We all got to come back here in 2 weeks.
I think we're all saying that. I think we're all saying we can let's look at it. I won't be calling Mike as often because I know he's going to be busy.
All right, so I'll just call the question. All those in favor of the adjustment? Aye. Any opposed?
No.
No. All right, passes 3-2. All right. Can we conclude the budget discussion for tonight? I'll take that as a yes. Moving on to new business, we voted.
That was on that motion. Comment on the budget in general.
On the budget itself? Okay, sure.
I'm George Sladani. I'm the chair of the Finance Committee. I'd like to share some thoughts that the Finance Committee has about the budget. We're pleased that the board has set a minimum amount for the reserve going forward that shows fiscal responsibility. And we're also happy that they're considering the tax increase to help improve the fiscal condition of the township. The ESI report verified that the township has kept spending down over the past several years, and the benchmarking that was done shows that several departments are below what they should be budget and personnel-wise. So it's a credit to the township for the past several years to run a tight ship. Unfortunately, that still isn't good enough. There's a $700,000 plus structural deficit that the township is running. That's primarily attributable to the loss of revenue from Lockheed Martin. There's only 2 ways that the township can raise a major amount of money. They can raise taxes, or they can increase revenue. The taxes you can increase immediately. Increasing the revenue in a $700,000 to $1 million range per year, that's going to take years to do. You're not going to cross your fingers. He said hope. What what has been accomplished over the last 5 years. People may have picked up the phone a couple of times and called people. What's the realistic chance you're going to pick up a phone and a company's going to say, I'll be right there. I'm going to take that property, I'm going to hire 1,000 people at high wages, and you're going to be fine. It doesn't happen. Time is money. You have to invest. $125,000 in a $14 million budget. 0.9%. What you're telling the Finance Committee is the township is not willing to invest less than 1% in its future going forward.
George, we are investing in hiring an assistant manager at $90,000.
That's part of it.
But that's nothing to you.
No.
You still want the 100.
Don't put words in my mouth, Bill.
Listen, I'm not here to argue with you or debate with you. I'm just saying you're up there now throwing percentages at us, where we have somebody in the budget
and I'm addressing that
will fulfill this position that you are talking about, which I would think would make you happy that we're going to have a assistant manager dedicated to economic development, which we didn't have in the past.
If the proper person is hired.
Well, I mean, that's what we have to make sure of.
That's correct.
I mean, for 5 years, we haven't had that person.
I see that that's a good step forward. I'm trying to show why we came up with approximately 125,000. And it's not asking for the moon. It's asking for a good investment. It actually should be higher than that. But what would you do with 125,000? There's like 3 major areas we can consider. The first would be try to figure out the best way to do economic development. You know, the economic situation in the country has changed. The economic situation in Newtown has changed. Somebody is going to make money off of the hardship that the township is going through. Who should do that? Where should we put our money? What should we invest in? The second item that just comes to mind is full-time help. Competently, dedicated for that purpose. There's a lot of stuff that the ECD has recommended. I think they're doing a great job. I think they've identified a lot of the top priorities. But as Dennis pointed out, an analogous situation is coming up with the ESI report being done just by volunteers versus paying somebody with better qualifications to do it. And the time is money situation. I think it would have taken the Finance Committee 2 to 3 years to come up with that report. And it would have been just as good. We wrote those conclusions a long time ago. They were obvious conclusions. But we would have to learn how to do the benchmarking and go through the process and do the comparisons to see. We would have had, I don't know if we would have gotten the same cooperation from the township to interview the managers and to put those numbers together. So we can have good, dedicated people doing economic development activities, but you still need somebody full-time or at least half-time qualified, specifically qualified for that, to do it. And then the third thing is there's a strong likelihood, talking with the grant people from the state, that we could get a phase 2 grant. It would still be a cost share, but it's something that we could look at and specifically try to identify where it would be helpful to us. The part that I would like to see, the committee would like to see, is the dedication that the township is serious about doing economic development. You look at the eConsult report, they put a very strong emphasis on the need to do that economic development. And right now, it really comes down to pay me now or pay me later. There was just hope that somebody was going to come in and fill that $700,000 gap when Lockheed Martin left. If we don't start working now, and we kick the can down the road another year or 2 years before we start spending real money and dedicating real attention to economic development, we're further down the way. And the only way you're going to make up this deficit right now is taxes. Sad to say, but that's reality. Hopefully in the future, there could be a reduction in the taxes as economic development really starts to kick in. But you're looking in, realistically, 3 to 5 years out. I mean, I think part of what the committee heard from the supervisors was they were very pleased that we were going to do a 5-year plan with eConsult for the first time, maybe the first time ever. But it was going to be long-term thinking, a commitment to not look at just what we did last year and kick it up 3%, or what we did last year and just incrementally increase it, but what we're going to do, what's best for the township over a 5-year period. And yes, it's going to call for sacrifice early on, but you have to get something, you have to invest to get something good in the long run. If we're not willing to invest, I mean, what does that say about both the elected officials and the integrity of the citizens? I look at the fact we only have 3 people signed up to come to the Economic Forum on Saturday. That kind of tells me that maybe people aren't that far up in arms about things, that they realize that the township has been underfunded for a number of years, and now it's time to pay up. It's not the perfect time to do it, but sometimes the hard stuff has to be done, and we can increase our chances of success by investing. There's no guarantee. I mean, we could say that we spend $100,000 a year for the next 5 years. We may still not get a Lockheed Martin. But you know pretty well what the probability of getting a Lockheed Martin is if you spend 0 each year, or a minimum amount of money. It's just not going to happen. You have to talk to all these people. You have to build the relationships. You have to get the business community to buy in on it. It has to be done. We have to look to see what tax advantages or what funding we could get from government agencies. It's not a simple matter. It's going to take a lot of time, a lot of dedication. And that's the idea that I wanted to leave from the committee. That we were looking to the board. We're doing our best to analyze the financial situation and make our recommendations. We'd like them to be considered seriously. We'd like to have more input for a difference of opinion. We had 0 input into this draft budget. What does that say about the regard that the Board of Supervisors has for the Financial Committee when our mandate is to look at budgets, contribute to budgets, critique the budgets, and look at long-term spending? You wanted to kind of wrap everything up tonight. 0 input from the Finance Committee other than our recommendation for a $125,000 placeholder. Less than 1% of next year's budget.
Again, George, I don't know why you're not happy that you will be working with someone who will be dedicated to economic development. At $90,000, and what we're talking about, what was it, $37,000 was what went to ESI? That's the difference between your 120 and your 90,000. But you're going to have a person in-house that you can come and talk to and see. But all you want to do is basically degrade the supervisors and say that we're not cooperating. Well, we're putting this into the budget. We're putting someone to help Micah and help the Finance Committee also. So to say we're not doing anything is not the right thing to say.
No, I apologize for that. That was not my intent.
But you get what I'm saying? 90,000, the difference is the 37,000, which we did get the grant. to do that. So
If the right person
in a
is,
roundabout way, we're working that into the system.
if the right person is hired, then
With
it
that
means a lot.
expertise.
Yeah.
If the right person is not hired, then it won't be as effective. I mean, that's pretty straightforward.
I won't use that word hope, but I'm sure Micah knows who to look for, and we'll get that particular person. And if not, we'll have to whip the person in shape, because that's going to be their directive, along with helping Micah run the township. But at least we have, right now, we don't have anybody to go to.
I understand.
So we have that person.
For a long time, we didn't have a finance director.
Exactly. So we're getting there.
I know.
And we don't want you to, or the committee to get discouraged, because we do appreciate the work you do. And we want you to do more, but now we want you to work with a particular person that may be able to also assist you.
And down the road, maybe next year, maybe we can get a different procedure where the finance committee gives some input in the process as it's going like 3 months ahead. I mean, that is because it's really never been done that way.
That's all I had to say.
Okay.
I again, did not mean to disparage anybody. Tends to be impatient and
It's
passionate
late.
about trying to get something done.
It's
so.
late.
I got thick skin, it doesn't, don't worry.
Thank you.
I'm a Latino, so relax. Thank you, John. I appreciate it. I think, I like that.
Can I beg indulgence for one more minute? To ask about what happens November 10th or whenever. I mean, can we make change after the preliminary budget is presented? We can make changes, but they're limited. Is that correct?
You can make changes to the budget, provided that the individual major categories do not go up or down over 25%, or the entire budget as an aggregate does not change up or down by more than 10%.
But is that if we hang the budget?
That's right, correct.
Correct. That's once you hang the budget.
But I mean, I hate to throw a wrench in the machinery here, but we don't have to hang the budget next meeting.
You just need 20 days before the December 31st.
I mean, I hate to break news, I hate to break the news to some board members, but I remember showing up December 31st to approve a budget, because it just, so.
It's been
Yep.
done.
It's December 11th is the magic day.
Well,
It's
yeah,
just 20 days
yeah,
before the
that's the ultimate,
31st,
sure.
and you must have authorized the preliminary budget by that time to be hung.
Gotcha. I just have one item. Does anybody have any new business?
Mr. Chairman, I just have to make a comment on my thoughts as the coronavirus cases start to spike, or have been spiking. We may need to consider potentially going back to Zoom, because as it gets colder and as cases start to spike, potentially. And I enjoy sitting here with all of you and the residents, and I got to tell you, it's been refreshing. But I think that we all have to consider our health. So that might be something we need to discuss. I know that there have been concerns about the level of sounds, and also public comments, and also how we go about doing that. But I think we need to consider that as an option because of what is transpiring currently. Thank you.
Well, I want to say I'm a person at risk, being 74 years old.
You're 74 years old?
Oh, come on.
With underlying medical conditions like overweight, whatever. But I am vehemently opposed to having Zoom meetings at 1 o'clock in the afternoon. You're talking about having residents participate. Residents are working. So unless the Zoom meeting is at like 7 o'clock, when people after dinner can attend, and unless residents can actually attend and make comments, I would be all in favor of Zoom meetings.
Okay. Well,
On those conditions, though.
Last time we spoke, you were going to check out about getting people in.
I did check out. Go to Wrightstown. Look how they do it. I mean,
That's not answering my question.
What's the question?
Do you know how to do it?
me? No, I already have a job.
Step by step.
It's not my job to run a Zoom meeting for the township.
All right. I don't think anybody's opposed to 7 o'clock Zooms. Kyle, are you?
No, I'm not opposed.
Okay. The only thing I can say about the next meeting is it's kind of hard to discuss the budget, maybe over Zoom.
Well, no, that's fair.
I think after the budget season is over,
Yes.
and this COVID is still, I don't think it's going away, I think then we should consider going back to Zoom.
I would
So
agree with that.
after December 31st, you're saying, so.
Well, I mean, if we pass the budget,
I mean, if
I would say after we pass the budget, and we can pass the budget within the next month, if it goes smoothly, we could go back to Zooms.
I mean, I guess if the Department of Health and the governor decide to shut down whatever, not saying that they will, but if the infection rates and the hospitalizations and all those things go haywire, I mean, we'll have to look case by case. But
I would just like everyone to start having it on their minds. And I understand that we need 7 o'clock or whatever's convenient for the public. I totally understand that. But we want to make sure that we're just thinking about it. Because at some point,
it's
we have
being
to...
done
Hold on, let me finish. I think at some point, we have to realize that inviting individuals into a room to talk about this stuff, which is very important, but also I think we also have to be mindful as a body is that we need to protect ourselves and also our residents. So that is something that we just need to keep top of mind.
Well, I agree with you. There is a certain amount of risk, perhaps. But unless residents can participate in the Zoom meeting, we're not really having a public meeting. And our committees are already doing this. The Human Relations Commission puts out, you can ask them how they do it if you need expert advice, and Olivia, helps, and Mary over there. But the way the Human Relations Commission does it is they use Zoom to put out a registration form that people have to click on, and they get an invite, and they get a code that's only good for them. And this is how Wrightstown does it as well. So the technology is there, and it's very easy to do, and the Human Relations Commission and the other committees have had absolutely no problem with participants in Zoom meetings at 7 o'clock, 7:30 at night. And residents do sign up. So that's mine.
Well, I got to tell you, John, if we were to do that at 7 o'clock, I think that would make sense because you've got a lot to say, and I couldn't sit on a Zoom call for 1 to 3 o'clock because I got a job to do as well, so I understand. Thank you.
Okay, let's not belabor it. Agreed. I don't think we have anything else. No executive session. Right, Mr. Sanders? Okay. So without objection, I'll take a motion to adjourn. Thank you. Good night, everybody.